Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our council meeting at 4 p.m. I'm going to be calling our meeting to order, and I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters in which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Does anybody have any pecuniary interests before we begin? None were received. So we're going to now be moving into a closed session. Proceeding into closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act to address items pertaining to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, Section 239(2)C, potential acquisition of land and other land matters. So can I get a mover and seconder to go into closed? Moved by Councillor Darrell, second by Councillor Clare. All in favor? And that is passed. And please note that I will provide a rise and report publicly to the open council meeting once the closed session is completed. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the council chambers. I'm going to be calling our council meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. And before I begin, I'd like to provide a few friendly reminders. Assistive living devices are available for anyone who may need one during tonight's meeting. Please see the deputy clerk who can help you sign one out and to get set up. We also kindly that you ask that you oh my goodness, I'm just tongue twisted this evening. It's been a very long day. It started already 12 hours ago. So we would ask that all devices please be returned at the end of the meeting so that they can be collected and made available for future use. Please also note that washrooms are located down the hall to the left, and in the event of an emergency, residents are asked to exit in an orderly fashion using the stairs located outside of the council chambers. Should the staircase become unavailable, residents will be asked to proceed down the fire escape located at the back of council chambers, and if assistance is required, please see staff. We're going to start with a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. I'm going to move on to our land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe traditional territory covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and waters on which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska Forest and River. We pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those who make their home in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on to the next item, does anyone around the council table have any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I note that none were received prior to this evening's meeting. I also want to note that our deputy mayor is not with us this evening due to an emergency. Moving on to item number 3, closed session. Earlier today, council passed a motion to proceed into closed session at 4 p.m. to consider business as permitted under the Municipal Act and as listed on today's agenda. This motion was passed in a public session, streamed live, and was in accordance with our closed meeting policy. Moving on to item number 4, business arising from closed session. In the continuing interest of transparency, I can report at this open meeting the outcomes from today's closed session. Council approved the closed session minutes from April 21st and April 23rd of this year. These were the last times Council met in closed session. Council also received information related to proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, Section 239 2C. And can I get a mover and seconder for the following motion that Council receive confidential reports LLS 2226 and CAO 0526 for information, and the Council confirm the confidential direction provided to staff in closed session. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Les, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favour? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to item number 5, announcements, awards, and recognitions. We're going to start with item 5.1, the Fire Chief's Civilian Citation. Today, we honor members of our community who step forward without hesitation to help others in a moment of need. Their awareness, courage, and compassion made a meaningful difference and helped to ensure the safety and well-being of others. Their actions remind us that each individual can have an extraordinary impact and reflect the strong sense of care that make Port Hope such a special community. So on behalf of Council, I would like to extend my sincerest appreciation and gratitude to Morgan Bayliss, Jody Owen, and Wes Roche. We are proud to recognize their bravery and selflessness, and I'm going to ask the Chief to come up.
Check one. Hear that? Perfect. Everyone hear me? Fancy. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this special night. Just want to follow up on some of the mayor's comments. So, give you some details about why we're here today, honoring these folks. So, on April 27th of this year, approximately 8:27, Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services responded to reports of a residential structure fire at 49 Caroline Street. At the time of the incident, Mr. and Mrs. Longmire, their great-granddaughter Morgan Bayliss, and the 2 cats were inside the home when a fire occurred in the kitchen area of the structure, which quickly filled the residence with smoke. When the upstairs smoke alarm activated, Morgan immediately woke, recognized the danger, discovered smoke throughout the home, and without hesitation contacted 911 and assisted her great-grandparents down the stairs. Across the street, neighbors Jody Owen and Wes Roach heard the smoke alarm sounding and observed smoke coming from the open front door of the home. Recognizing the emergency was unfolding, Wes immediately ran across the street and assisted Mr. and Mrs. Longmire in evacuating the home, while Jody contacted 911 to ensure emergency services were on their way. Thanks to the quick actions of Morgan, Jody, and Wes, all occupants safely escaped the residence. Fire crews quickly extinguished the fire and ventilated the home, preventing further loss. Their actions exemplify the spirit of community, neighborly care, and personal courage that make Port Hope the place it is to live. By acting quickly, calmly, and selfishly during the emergency, they help protect lives and demonstrate an exceptional commitment to safety and as well as well-being of others. In recognition of their outstanding actions and dedication of helping others during the emergency, Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services is proud to award this Fire Chief Civilian Citation to Morgan Bayliss, Jody Owen, and Wes Roach. You okay to take a picture?
Yes.
Perfect. With the mayor? Yeah. Do you want to stay in the middle?
Yes.
There we go. Here we go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You got that? Say cheese. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How are you? Good to see you again. Yeah, for sure. So Wes is you're going to accept the certificate on behalf of yourself and Jody as well. So I'll give you both of them here. Do you want to stand in the middle for a photograph? There you go. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That sounded like a lot of pictures.
That's right.
One of them's got to be good. Perfect. Thank you very much again. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, and thank you, Chief. I'm going to move on to another item that I'd like the Chief to speak to right after I make some introductory comments, and that is an update on the File Factory. As many of you are aware, regrettably, there was a significant fire at the File Factory location that has destroyed the buildings. I will now turn it over to the Fire Chief to provide more information.
Thank you, through the Mayor and Council. At 4:55 this morning, Port Hope Fire and Emergency Services responded to a 911 call in relation to a reported structure fire at 121 Cabin Street, the former File Factory. Upon arrival, our crews discovered developing fire conditions from within the structure, which has been deemed a no-go zone, or what that means is basically a building which we do not enter due to the risk of structural collapse. Defensive fire suppression operations were undertaken, utilizing mutual aid support from Cobourg Fire Department as well and their aerial apparatus. We continued to fight the blaze throughout the day, utilizing heavy equipment to expose hotspots and to assist us with fire suppression, as well as conducting a primary search of the building to ensure that there was no one inside the structure at the time of the fire. We've just now actually cleared the scene. We deemed it to be a loss stopped. Fencing is being put in place. We have security on the scene to maintain continuity of the location right now. An investigation into the origin, cause, and circumstances of the fire is continuing at this time, and we'll be on scene likely tomorrow morning with members of Port Hope Police Service and our Fire Prevention Bureau to follow up with the investigation.
Thank you very much, Chief. And can you just clarify for the community if there's anything still standing of the File Factory?
Unfortunately, due to the amount of fire spread, utilization of heavy equipment that was required to conduct fire suppression operations, as well as make it safe for our folks to conduct primary search of that location to ensure no one was inside, there is no remaining structure left at that location.
So just to reiterate, there is no remaining structure. Remaining investigation is still continuing, and of course, when we have updates, we'll be fully informing the community as we go along. Thank you very much for your service and for our fire department's bravery and service, and of course, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to Cobourg for coming to assist you as well. I know that it's been a remarkably long day for you, so appreciate you being here and giving us that update. Moving on to the next update, Jack Burger pool closure. Please note that the pools and the hot tub at the Jack Burger Sports Complex will be closed from June 22nd to July 5th to accommodate regularly scheduled maintenance, which is essential to keeping our amenities and facilities operating safely and efficiently. The facility, including all amenities, will reopen on Monday, July 6th during the closure. Staff will remain available by phone, email, or in person during regular business hours at the Town Park Recreation Centre to assist with any inquiries. Next update is around the Highland Games. The Northumberland Scottish Festival and Highland Games returns to Port Hope this weekend. We're really excited about that. Residents can expect increased traffic, pedestrians, and pipe band members around Town Park Recreation Centre. Please take caution and observe the temporary parking restrictions in the area, but most importantly, please come out and enjoy the festivities. And for more details, please visit porthope.ca/news. Indigenous Peoples Day. Looking ahead to next week, June 21st, 2026, is the 30th anniversary of National Indigenous Peoples Days. It's a time to recognize and celebrate the traditions, cultures, and contributions of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples. National Indigenous Peoples Day takes place on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. For generations, many First Nations, Inuit and Métis communities have celebrated their cultures, languages, and traditions at this time of year. The summer solstice holds deep spiritual and cultural significance for many Indigenous peoples, making it a time of renewal, connection, and celebration. Moving from that to Canada Day. Canada Day is also just around the corner, and we are planning our annual community celebration and activities in downtown Port Hope. The festivities will begin on the evening of June the 30th with our annual movie in the park and continue into July 1st with our parade, live performances, car show, party in the park, fireworks, and much more. A reminder that there will be road closures in the areas of Walton Street and Queen Street to accommodate the activities. Please learn more by going to porthope.ca/Canada-Day. And of course, it's always such an incredibly fun event and celebratory event for the community. Moving on to Parks and Trails Plan, we are taking an important step towards enhancing our parks, open spaces, and trails by developing a new Parks and Trails Plan. This plan builds on an earlier work completed in the 2021 Leisure Services Master Plan with a focus on current needs and future growth so that residents can continue to enjoy safe, accessible, and welcoming outdoor spaces. As we all know, parks and trails play a vital role in the everyday life of a community. They provide places for people to stay active, connect with nature, spend time with family and friends, and support overall health and well-being. To support this, the municipality is taking a close look at how parks and trails are currently used and where improvements may in fact be needed. This includes identifying gaps in services, new or adaptive recreational facilities and opportunities. That's very important. The process also considers future needs, taking into account population growth, changing demographics, and emerging recreation trends. The Parks and Trails Plan will serve as a practical roadmap for the future. It will outline priorities and help the municipality plan and budget for improvements in responsible and sustainable ways. A community engagement strategy will be underway shortly. Watch our website and social media accounts for information on how to participate this summer and in this fall. And moving on to my last announcement, and that is the new ACL agreement, Redefining the Future. The municipality of Port Hope and Canada reached landmark agreement for historic waste. The municipality of Port Hope and ACL have reached a historic long-term agreement to provide greater flexibility and more options for the Port Hope Area Initiative project. As the PHAI has progressed, particularly on private properties, it has become clear that it is not always practical or beneficial to remove all of the eligible waste from every location. Under the agreement, the Port Hope Long-Term Waste Management Facility will be able to safely accept low-level radioactive waste in Port Hope for up to 100 years after the end of the PHAI project. Now property owners can choose to leave eligible low-level radioactive waste undisturbed beneath existing features such as mature or historic trees or landscaping and have the material removed later if needed. This gives property owners the ultimate choice and flexibility and long-term certainty to decide what is in their best needs. Specific details of the agreement will be available once we put out an official media release, which is happening momentarily. It outlines all of the details of the agreement, and we look forward as having this as a piece of another piece of the puzzle to move forward to ensure that not only do we stay on track with the timelines of the project, but there's also a potential to shorten the timelines of the project and to empower the citizens of Port Hope. Moving on, do council members have any updates that they would like to share this evening from around the table? Okay, seeing none, that completes our updates for the moment, and now we will move to the report from our youth councillors. So I would like to welcome our youth councillors to the table, Emily and Leah, to present us with their report to council. And we'll start, I think, with Emily, and then, yeah, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Council. Since the last meeting, I've attended the Port Hope Library meeting. This was a very cool and new experience where I was able to share my thoughts and ideas in regard to the Port Hope Library. I would love to be invited again because I really enjoyed getting to share my thoughts and opinions for the library. This past weekend was a very important weekend for myself. On the Saturday, I got to participate in Mud Girl, where amongst over 1,000 other women and girls, I got to race. It was a very fun day full of cheering and laughing. On the Sunday was my Cadet Corps 116 Skeena's 85th annual ceremonial review. It's something we prepare for all year long, and I received a special award from the Government Ontario for Cadets Community Service amongst multiple other awards. I'd like to thank the Deputy Mayor, even though he's not here, for attending and also speaking there. And as many of you know, right now is high school exam season, so if you know any high schoolers, wish them luck right now. I would also like to mention how excited I am for the upcoming Canada Day celebrations and parade. However, I'd like to note that I will not be present at the July meeting. And I would like to hope everyone has a fantastic summer, and I'll see you all in August.
Thank you for that update, and we look forward to seeing you at the Canada Day Parade as well.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Since our last meeting, I attended the Port Hope Fall Fair Youth Leadership Conference at the Port Hope Lions Centre. At the conference, I had the opportunity to work with other youth on public speaking, presentation, and learned of ways how the Port Hope Fair is rooted in Port Hope. I attended the Parks and Recreation walk-around tour, where we got a chance to put on our feet on the ground of where active and potential changes are happening in the community, looking at the West Beach, the Sculthorpe March, and the Sculthorpe Walking Trail. I also went to the Port Hope Library meeting, where I got a chance to meet the committee, as well as share some thoughts and ideas on how the library could be more welcoming to youth, and opportunities for the library to be more of a resource to the youth of Port Hope. Thank you to Margaret Scott for reaching out and inviting the youth councillors. I attended the Civic Award Committee, where the plans for next year's Civic Awards are already being discussed. The Port Hope Pride event took place just a couple weeks ago and was a welcoming environment where youth were encouraged to attend. The event included a youth vendor market where youth had the opportunity to showcase and sell products. In review of tonight's agenda, I note that there's discussion of the tennis court at the Town Park Rec Center. The Port Hope tennis courts have been a resource that the youth of Port Hope have had access to over the years. And as well, Port Hope High School has been using it for practice and training for the school's tennis team. I hope the new installation of the dome will still permit easy and welcoming access to youth of Port Hope and Port Hope High School students. Thank you.
Thank you very much for both of those reports. Thank you for being here. And certainly access is something that we have been discussing at this council table to some of the changes to the tennis court. So thank you for bringing that forward to us. Thank you. I should have asked if anybody had any feedback or comments for our youth, so I'm going to go around and ask. I'll start with Councillor Mink and then go over to Councillor Clare.
Thank you. So thank you for the update, and I just wanted to thank you again for attending the library board meeting. And well, for those listening, I think at the library board often we focus on young youth. Parents and children, and you brought a much different perspective of being of your age. So thank you for that feedback, and it was definitely heard and considered, and hopefully moving forward you'll attend another meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mink and Councillor Clare.
Thank you. I was actually just going to say, Leah, especially your comment on an agenda item that we're considering tonight. I think that's great, and I really appreciate that, and I hope we'll see more of that as well. I know you are both so involved and you're providing input at all of the committees and all of those opportunities. The public doesn't necessarily get to see that, but you are doing that actively. But it's also cool to see you looking at the agenda and bringing forward that youth perspective before we deliberate and have our final vote. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And yes, and to that point, Councillor Clare, I know that you even made it through one of the toughest sessions for us being part of the budget deliberations. So we do appreciate all of the engagement. So thank you very much again. Moving on to item number 7, delegations. It's now time for delegations. We have one delegation on the agenda tonight. I would like to ask our delegate, please, to be mindful of their 10-minute time limit as set out in the procedural bylaw. And please note that the bell will ring when you have 2 minutes remaining. So I'd like to invite Wendy Riley, Animal Care Director, and Kim Good, Capital Campaign Director, Northumberland Humane Society, regarding new vision for the future of animal care in Northumberland County. And a warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you. I think we have to go back a slide. There we go. Good evening to the mayor, deputy mayor's not here, council and staff, and to the youth council. Thank you for the opportunity for being here today. My name is Kim Good. This is Wendy Riley, just in case people were wondering which one was which. We are here to share what is happening at the shelter, the role we play across Northumberland County, and our vision for the future of animal welfare in our community. Got it. Many people know the Humane Society through pet adoptions or stray animals, but today we would like to share a broader story. The Northumberland Humane Society has evolved into a community resource that supports both animals and people. As demand continues to grow, we are planning for a future so we can continue meeting those needs for decades to come. When people think about the animal shelter, they often think about the happy moments, the adoptions, the puppies, the kittens, the happy endings, and those moments are absolutely part of what happens. But they are only part of the story. Every day, our staff and volunteers care for animals that arrive frightened, injured, neglected, abandoned, and sometimes fighting for their lives. They are also supporting the people connected to those animals, families experiencing illness, financial hardship, housing instability, loss, or personal crisis. This work can be emotionally demanding. Compassion fatigue, caregiver burnout, and the weight of making difficult decisions are realities of animal welfare work. And yet, despite all this, our team shows up every day with professionalism, resilience, and extraordinary compassion. That is why we often say animal welfare workers are frontline caregivers, just in a different kind of healthcare environment. The Northumberland Humane Society has grown significantly over the years. Last year alone, we supported more than 1,200 animals across the county. We helped 619 animals find loving homes, reunited 214 lost pets with their families, and supported 300 animals through our pet food bank, and provided emergency assistance through our Compassion Care program. More than 150 volunteers contributed their time and talents to support this work. Today, we serve the community of more than 89,000 residents. The number tells an important story. The shelter is no longer simply a shelter. It is an essential community resource serving both animals and people.
Our impact extends far beyond the walls of the shelter. Through programs like animal sheltering and adoption, the Pet Food Bank, Pet Aid, Compassion Crisis Care, Humane Education, and volunteer programs, we help strengthen the bond between people and their pets. For many people, pets are family. They provide companionship, emotional support, stability, and connection. By helping people care for their animals they love, we are also helping to build a healthier and more compassionate community. That is why we believe animal welfare is community welfare. While our programs and services have grown significantly, our facility has not. The shelter we operate today was never designed for the level of care, the volume of animals, or the range of services we now provide. The challenge before us is simple. Demand has outgrown our space. This building was originally built as a municipal pound almost 25 years ago. Today it functions as a full-service humane society. We have adapted the space in every way possible, but the reality is that the facility limits our ability to provide the level of care our community expects and our animals deserve. Animal welfare is often viewed as optional. In reality, it is an essential community service. It supports public safety through the responsible care of lost, abandoned, or neglected and at-risk animals. It contributes to community well-being by helping families navigate through difficult circumstances while keeping beloved pets safe and cared for. And it supports vulnerable residents because for many people, a pet is more than a companion. They are a source of comfort, stability, connection, and emotional support. In many ways, our work sits alongside other community support systems, simply through the lens of animal care. That is why we believe animal welfare is community welfare. Angel's story reminds us of why this work matters. She was found abandoned on the side of a road, blind, frightened, confused, and alone. When she arrived at the Northumberland Humane Society, we knew almost nothing about her past. But we could see the signs of serious neglect. Her ears showed the effects of years of untreated infections. Her nails were painfully overgrown into her paw pads. She was suffering from painful skin infections and had some significant wounds on her hindquarters. She was vulnerable, disoriented, and in urgent need of care. What we did know was that she was house-trained, someone had loved her at some point, and she was just not another stray dog. She had a history, a family, and a life before arriving at our doors. Then something remarkable happened. Through the grace of social media, we found out that her name was Angel. We learned her name, but nobody came to claim her. We went to her kennel and called her name. She responded, happy, tail wagging, raised nose in the air. It was a small moment, but one we'll never forget. In that instant, Angel reminded us that every animal who comes through our doors has a story we may never fully know. Over the weeks that followed, our staff and volunteers cared for Angel, earning her trust and helping her rediscover safety. And then Angel found her second chance. Today, she's living her best life with a family experienced in caring for blind dogs, a family that saw the remarkable dog that she had always been. Angel's story has a happy ending. But every day animals arrive at our doors with stories we have not yet heard, trauma we have not yet understood. Every one of them deserves the opportunity to heal, to be loved, and to find their way home. That is why this work matters. And that is why creating a humane environment for care is so important.
This is not simply a campaign about expanding a building. It's a campaign to create a humane environment where animals can heal, where caregivers, volunteers, and animals can thrive, and where our community's values are reflected in the way we care for the most vulnerable among us. It is an investment in compassionate care. It is an investment in the people and the animals we serve, and it is an investment in the values that define our community. This rendering represents the future we are working toward. A purpose-built facility designed around animal well-being, accessibility, and community service. A place where compassionate care has room to grow.
Every element of this design has been created with outcomes in mind: reducing stress, improving health, supporting volunteers and staff, creating a welcoming environment for every member of our community who comes through our doors. That is what modern humane care requires.
Our vision will be achieved in phases. We will begin with a new humane shelter, followed by improvements to the existing building, and ultimately expanded to veterinarian services. Each phase builds capacity, expands services, and increases our ability to serve the community. Phase 1 will be the new shelter, a 6,200 square foot expansion that will be accessible, welcoming, and designed around animal well-being. Phase 2 will transform the existing building into a space for dog enrichment, volunteer and staff wellness, community education, and enhanced support services. Phase 3 looks like the future with low-cost veterinarian services, including spay and neuter, preventative care, and expanded access to veterinarian support. One vision, 3 phases, and decades of support.
At its heart, this project is about creating a community care center, not simply a large shelter. A place designed to support frontline caregivers who provide comfort, treatment, rehabilitation, and hope every day. A place where humane design reduces stress, improves health, and promotes well-being for animals, staff, volunteers, and visitors. A place where vulnerable residents can access support and keep the pets that are often their greatest source of companionship and emotional connection. And a place where animal welfare is recognized for what it truly is, an essential part of a healthy, compassionate community. This project is not just about building space, it is about building capacity to care. Angel received her second chance and found her way home. And every community deserves a place where more animals can receive that same compassionate care. A place where animals are safe, a place where animals and families find support, and a place where compassion has room to grow. A place built on second chances. For 60 years, the Northumberland Humane Society has evolved to meet the changing needs of animals and the people who care for them. Today, we have an opportunity to create a modern, accessible, and compassionate center of care that will serve our community for decades to come. This is not simply a project to expand a building. It is an investment in frontline caregivers, animals' well-being, vulnerable residents, and a stronger, more compassionate community. It is an investment in second chances. Thank you for your time, your leadership, and the opportunity to share our vision with you this evening. Together, we can build a space where animals find safety, families find support, and compassion has room to grow. A future built on second chances, where animals find their way home. We would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing that information and telling us a little bit about your future plans. And I'm going to start off by just asking, is there a goal that you have in mind in terms of your fundraising and your plans?
Yes, there is. Our goal ultimately for the expansion and the development of the new building is $4 million, and we're already partway there.
Thank you for that. And going around the table, any questions and comments? Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation. I do have some comments, but then I have some questions. So I guess my first comment is to the public. So about 10 or 15 years ago now, I volunteered about 3 or 4 days a week at the Humane Society, and it was a wonderful experience. And many people had said to me when I asked them, hey, do you want to come out and volunteer? They would say, it's too heartbreaking. And I would like to put it out there that, yes, there are sad things that you see, but it is also extremely rewarding. There are other opportunities to volunteer outside of the shelter at fundraising events throughout the community. So there's all sorts of different ways to get involved. It's nice to see the expansion. I think where you are, I want to thank the volunteers. You can only do so much within the confines that you're in. And unless that boundaries expand, you're never going to catch up, right? The community is growing. We have changing needs, and like you said, pets are becoming part of our family. I know in parts of Europe, you get bereavement now time for pets, so it's changing. The culture is changing, and we need to adapt to that. So with your fundraising, a couple questions. The $4 million, is that all public fundraising, or would you be using some of your reserves, or are you making an ask to the municipality? What's the model?
So we're not making an ask. Right now, we're just here to share information about our vision of where we're going. We serve your community. We want just to let you know so you understand what your community is experiencing. We actually have earmarked and saved really hard for a long time, so we have $1 million to put toward the campaign ourselves, and then the rest of it will be coming from the public.
Perfect. And one other question. So we had a couple delegations come over the past couple of years speaking about TNR programs.
Right.
And for those that are listening, that's trap, neuter, and release, and it's a way to mitigate the kitten influx that we get every year. Is there any plan to make that more of a public program along with the shelter expansion?
Absolutely. In regards to programs, it's one of the top priorities on my list. Anybody that lives in remote areas knows fully well the kitten season crisis. I can advise you right now we're up to 26 litters, and that's happened over the last 3 months, so it's substantial. With a bigger shelter, we have more room to help. So that plan is definitely on our agenda.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mink. Any other questions or comments from around the table? Thank you again for coming to share this information, and we look forward to future updates as well. Thank you.
We'd also welcome if anybody wanted to come for a visit anytime, just to reach out, and we'd happily tour you through the current location so you could see why we need to expand.
That's
Thank
very
you.
helpful. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for that. So the recommended motion this evening is to receive the delegation for information. So can I get a mover and seconder on that? Moved by Councillor Darrell and seconded by Councillor Mink. All in favor? That is passed. Thank you. Now we're going to be moving on to item number 8, which is the public comment period. It's now time for public comment period. And as our procedural bylaw, the purpose of the public comment period is for members of the public to provide comments on items that are on today's council agenda. If you have questions related to an item that's not on tonight's agenda, please wait until question period, which is later in the meeting. I request that you keep your comments brief and respectful. I also remind council members that no questions or comments can be directed to those providing public comments tonight. And if you would like to provide a comment, please approach the podium now and state your name, and staff will turn on the mic.
Hi, Council. Cameron Green, Port Hope. I understand that Council will be receiving a confidentially negotiated settlement agreement with AECL this evening. And at the outset of the project, the Government of Canada stated that current owners of properties cannot be reasonably held responsible for historic waste. Again, current owners of properties cannot reasonably be held responsible for historic waste. However, today homeowners are responsible for waste that will be left on their property with potential future financial liability, and now own properties that are formally labeled as contaminated. This special circumstance protocol was apparently developed behind closed doors without informing or asking for input from homeowners. And I'm unaware of any communication or request for input from residents in the lead up to this negotiation of this settlement agreement. Apparently, special circumstances was first introduced in 2018, and perhaps the municipality did not appreciate the future consequences of special circumstances, as the protocol stated that special circumstances would be applied only in a very small number of unique situations. In 2023, the protocol was amended, still stating that it would only be applied in a very small number of unique situations. In this settlement being received for information tonight, we're now told that special circumstances is a more widely used remediation approach with an increase in volume and location of special circumstances. That's 2 minutes? During your discussion, when you receive this confidential settlement agreement tonight, I hope you'll speak to homeowners and answer the following. Does this council agree that homeowners should be responsible in the future for waste left on their properties? Why are homeowners now responsible for waste left on their properties when at the outset the understanding was that current owners of properties cannot reasonably be held responsible? Why did homeowners not have a say in these changes to the original agreement? And who was representing the interest of homeowners during these changes to the original agreement? I appreciate the current council, most and the mayor, the CAO were not here during the time of these changes, but I'm hopefully you can correct this. At a September 2025 quarterly presentation to council, PHAI stated that they had heard clearly from the public and residents about their concerns regarding special circumstances. It said they're working very closely with the Government of Canada to revisit that. During your discussions tonight, I hope you will say if the municipality has engaged with PHAI and or the Government of Canada regarding those concerns. If so, what changes are being discussed and what is the status of those discussions? And if you haven't engaged with PHAI or the Government of Canada regarding concerns, will you? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to come forward with a public comment?
Madam Mayor and members of council, my name is Julia Duguay, and frankly, I'm disappointed that council has approved an agreement without homeowner consultation. I have 4 points to make. With regard to special circumstances, we need a permanent monetary trust for homeowners in perpetuity to cover future environmental disruptions or change in land use. CNL and ACL's appeal process is flawed. We need to allow representation and full disclosure of documents before any appeal hearings take place. CNL has tied up local lawyers and engineers. Because they have cornered local experts, the municipality must help us create an independent panel of professionals. Homeowners were not at the table for this agreement. I ask that the municipality conduct structured workshops using collaborative facilitation methods that bypasses anger and lets homeowners help shape a response that puts us at the table. An example is the canoe method, which uses think, pair, share, repeat. If Port Hope is to host the largest nuclear plant in Canada, AECL, NLPC, and CNL must do right by us first. The legacy left for future generations may force me to rethink my position on nuclear plants. The industry has few players who hold stakes in both remediation and new projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and your interventions. Anyone else would like to come up with a comment? Oh, we've got, yes, please.
David Evelyn, 95 Augusto. And I would like to echo the two individuals ahead of me. I was going to give you my 2 minutes. You said very succinctly what I firmly do believe. You have a confidential agreement. We were not party to that. And all of a sudden we're finding out that we have liability. And the federal government is the reason that we are in this predicament. And I do not believe that is the situation that we as property owners should be left to deal with. And I also agree with your comment about the trust. There should be in perpetuity financial awards for residents of Port Hope to make sure that we have the ability to transfer ownership of our properties to new owners without the stigma. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, esteemed members of council and staff. My name is Olga Quick. I live on 87 Augusta Street. I know you are aware of how important the letters of compliance are to members of this town, to the people of this town. With the new agreement, I hope that you realize how important it is that this issue is addressed more clearly and without tentacles, because there are now tentacles that come off of every letter. I myself received an interim letter of compliance advising me that my property was clean. However, that I would not receive a full letter of compliance because my neighbors' properties had not been cleaned. I don't think that it's right, and many people won't think that it's right to be held hostage that way. So my point is simple. If you are changing the agreement, this is something that should be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga. I think there was one other comment at the back.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Jeff Kane. I'm a Port Hope resident. I'm also on the board with Greenwood Coalition. I just wanted to take a quick moment and say thank you for your consideration with regards to the community garden, and I look forward to hopefully continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for that comment. Any final comments from the public this evening? Just wait another few seconds and make sure we haven't missed anybody. Okay, thank you very much for all of you who have come forward, and I'm hoping that at least some of the comments will be addressed later on in today's meeting. Moving on to item number 9, correspondence. We're going to start with item 9.1, students of Beatrice Strong Public School regarding playground equipment in Houston Park. And I'm going to ask Councillor Clare to introduce the correspondence.
Thank you. Sometimes these pieces can be fun. This is a particularly lovely, I think, item on the agenda. I had the pleasure of visiting a couple of classes at Beatrice Strong School earlier this spring to talk about municipal government as part of their social studies curriculum. And when I came to the part of my talk with them, when I asked them what they would do if they were me sitting at this table, hands flew up. And they almost all wanted to talk about their local park, in their neighborhood park, and their sense that there was nothing at their neighborhood park that was appropriate for their age, being the 11, 12 age range. So I pushed it back on them and I said, well, what are you going to do about it? Because you don't actually need to be a member of council to make a change in your community. And they got together with their teachers and they did a class project to write these letters, which have been combined under one piece of correspondence, asking us to consider the feasibility of installing some play equipment at Houston Park in the Chicken Dance neighborhood that would be appropriate for older kids. So I was pleased to elevate that to the agenda because I think when young people come together and start being active citizens, it's always something to celebrate and encourage. So I appreciate the consideration of my council colleagues.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clare. And we are all about being youth-focused and being youth-focused right down to our youngest members of Port Hope. So this is wonderful to see. The recommended motion that we do have on the table is to receive this for information, but I'm assuming there may be an alternative motion that's being put forward on this item. Councillor Todd.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I absolutely love this initiative. I love it for the reasons that we're seeing more and more. We saw with our youth councillors earlier today, we're seeing it more and more where the young people of Port Hope are mobilizing. And I love that. I love that they're finding their voice. I love that they're sharing their voice. I think this is a great example of how they have thoughtfully come forward. So yes, I would like to propose a new motion on this, or an alternate motion on this, which reads, whereas council received correspondence from students at Beatrice Strong Public School regarding play equipment at Houston Park for older kids, be it resolved that the correspondence be referred to staff for consideration. I think it's important that our staff take this under consideration when we are looking at our parks down the road, and I hope that we see more of this coming from our youth in the future.
Thank you for that, Councillor Todd. I don't think we're going to have a hard time finding a seconder for this, so seconded for Councillor Clare. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Mink.
Thank you. And I think this is great too. It's great to hear the youth come out. And I do remember we did have 2 young girls a few years ago who came in front of us and asked for a crosswalk, and we eventually got those, so that's fantastic. I'm just wondering if we have anyone from our senior staff that would like to make any sort of comment at this time.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity through the chair. I fully agree and support, the aspect related to receiving community comments on areas that are important to a neighborhood. This does align nicely with the work that will be occurring with the Parks and Trails Plan, and how we can accommodate and address some of the questions that have come forward through this group. And I do note there have been other comments from other members of the community specifically related to this park. So the timing is good. Staff are committed to including the comments through the Parks and Trails Plan work, and we'll do the follow-up with the individuals as well when the time is appropriate.
Thank you for that, Director. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, all in favor? Thank you, and that is passed unanimously. I'm going to now turn the chair over to Councillor Mink.
Thank you. Okay, so next is 9.2, Honourable Robert J. Flack, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding new Canada-Ontario Development Charge Reduction Program. This is brought forward by our Mayor, and I'm assuming you would like to speak about this.
Yes, and thank you for taking the chair. This is correspondence that came to my attention on June the 1st, and I'm bringing it forward to Council for consideration. So I'm just going to give you the high levels from this letter, which is the letter came inviting our municipality to apply to the new Canada-Ontario Development Charge Reduction Program beginning June 1st, 2026. And this program is part of the historic Canada-Ontario Partnership to Build that was announced on March the 30th of this year, which would provide up to $8.8 billion in new infrastructure funding to municipalities that reduce and maintain development charge reductions. The program requires DC reductions of at least 30 to 50% retroactive to March 30th, 2026. And this is at its very essence the core of this letter and this ask of us as a municipality. I do want to note before I turn it over to the CAO to fill out maybe a little bit more information, technically speaking, about this, that Cobourg Council this evening contemplated this item, agreed to this item, and agreed to reduce their DC charges by 50%. So that's literally hot off the press. But beyond that, I'd like to turn it over to our CAO for a few additional points of information.
Thank you, through you, Chair. A very exciting program, I think. It's in line with Council's mandate to increase housing in Port Hope. The main motivation is to take the burden off developers, and those costs would get passed on, those savings would get passed on to homeowners, future homeowners. The program is intended for funding infrastructure projects. Staff have worked, the program opened about the beginning of June, and application closes June 19th, so we've been working behind the scenes to identify infrastructure projects related to specific development projects that will attribute to increase in housing in Port Hope. It'll reduce the building costs and help speed up construction of new homes. That's the intent, so the province can meet their mandate of new homes. The key feature of this is really it's just a different funding source. Instead of going to the developers for development charges to pay for infrastructure, it's a funding source from the provincial federal collaborative program they put together, as the Mayor said, about $8.8 billion, which is a huge staggering amount. The key point here is that it's a cost recovery or cost neutrality. It is not going to be any added expense to Port Hope. It's just a different pot that the money's coming from. So I think that's the key to this program. But we are looking at, as well, following the higher range, closer to the 50%, based on the projects we have identified. Right now we have 3 that we have in the millions of dollars, so we're trying to see what will be accepted. There is no guarantee of acceptance into this program, but we figure it's worth a shot to move forward with this program. So tonight we are seeking council support to move forward with the application, with the caveat that once we see the final program, the final agreement, we also have the option of not signing it and moving forward.
Thank you to the CAO for that that information. I've got both Councillor Todd and Councillor Less. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. Question for the CAO. In your analysis, is there any risk that we should be aware of?
So I say we have the out at the end. We can always say no, right? At the final end before signing the agreement. There is no real risk. It's just a shuffling of dollars. So in my mind, from the developers through the development charges to the funding source that the provincial and federal government have put forward, we are committed to a 10% contribution as part of the program, but we would have factored that into our capital program anyways.
Thank you. And Councillor Less.
I find it amazing that the Ontario government, who generally I support, would sit on this project for who knows how long, write a letter June 1st, and ask for a response by June 19th. I mean, what quality response will you get from the municipalities other than probably panicked into if we don't do this, we're not going to get any money. So I think it's just incredibly bad. But as our CAO said, we make the application. If it's cost neutral, we'll proceed with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Less. Is there any other comments? Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I think surprisingly less. Today you took the words out of my mouth. Well, part of what you said. which is the part just around the timing. I think it's unfortunate that the timing window hasn't allowed us to receive more of a fulsome staff report before consideration. So I hope that would be coming forward with the agreement should we be selected, so we can get into the details a little bit better.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Clare. Yes, definitely we will be coming back once we have the agreement. We want to see what the offer is on the table. We have identified projects. I don't foresee it a losing effort. I think it's a positive step forward, and we have the option to say no in the end.
Okay, and so for me, I agree with the comments that have been made, so I don't have anything additional to add. So I'm just looking around. Is there any other comments, or the Mayor, would you like to put something forward?
Yes. The potential motion, I think that we've got some wording for it, so we'll bring it up onto the screen. I do want to note that this could also be a path forward for some of the ongoing discussions that we've had around the shortfall on our water tower, just as a little footnote. So the potential motion is that Council authorize staff to review the Canada-Ontario Development Charge Reduction Program and, if deemed appropriate and beneficial to the municipality, submit an application to the program, including a commitment to implement a 30 to 50% reduction in residential development charges for a period of 3 years in accordance with the program requirements.
Okay, thanks. And could I have a seconder for that motion? Anyone? Les? And is there any other comments now that we have a motion on the table? No? Okay, so I'll call the vote for all in favor. And that is carried unanimously, and I'll pass the chair back over to the Mayor now.
Thank you, Councillor Mink. Moving on to item number 10, the consent agenda, approval of minutes. Items listed under the consent agenda are considered collectively as one motion. Council members may request that specific items be removed for a separate discussion, deliberation, and action. The consent items are listed on the agenda. Would any member of council like to remove any of these items for separate discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to get a mover and seconder for the consent agenda here. Councillor Less is moving. Councillor Mink is the seconder. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Moving on to item number 11, consent agenda advisory committee and board meetings. Would anybody like to remove any of these items under the consent agenda for separate discussion? Seeing none, I need a mover and seconder to receive the advisory committee minutes as information. Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. At this point, we are going to recess for a 10-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we're going to be reconvening with item number 12. Items for consideration, starting with, can I get everyone's attention, please? Take your seats. We are starting. 12.1, Mitchell Cohen, CEO, the Daniels Corporation, regarding From the Ground, a municipal movement to address housing affordability. And please note that this item was referred from the May 19th meeting. Does council have any questions or comments on this item? Councillor Todd.
Yeah, I'll make a comment on this. I think when Mr. Cohen came forward, the initial ask was, hoping that Port Hope would join on as one of the founding members of this initiative, which would have coincided, with the Edmonton conference, which has now passed. He also did note that Port Hope is already doing a really good job of moving forward in this exact same vein. So I think there's some opportunity there for us to look at what the FCM is doing and join in as we see fit. But it's a great initiative. I was reading through it on the ground up, and as Mr. Cohen had pointed out, it's work that we're already moving forward on.
Anyone else want to? Councillor Clare?
Yeah, I think I'm also very supportive of the initiative. I think the reason we didn't deal with it when it first came forward was because it didn't seem right to deal with a motion directing you as mayor to sign on to something in your absence. So we wanted to push it to an agenda when you would be with us.
So thank you for that. And just a more practical question, given that the date of the conference has come and gone, just from, how does this look, moving forward? I do think it's a great idea, and as you point out, Councillor Todd, it's something that we're already in many ways doing. So I guess the question is there value added to continue on with signing up to this if that inaugural meeting has already happened? Have they earmarked others for that inaugural role? So it's just some of those details.
Yeah, my understanding is, regardless of whether or not you're part of the founding inaugural group, any municipality across Canada can be joining this at any time. The program itself, and don't get me wrong, I'm certainly not an expert in the program, but just sort of looking at it through their website, it's really a commitment to be able to give land forward for affordable housing opportunities. And so this, I think, formalizes some of the stuff that we're already doing within the municipality. My recommendation would be that, we look deeper at that, or have staff look deeper at that and come back as to what that would entail and see whether or not we want to join in.
Councillor Less.
Yeah, I think the key wording in here is setting the stage for the future for nonprofit housing. And we, at some point, will be into a situation we are going to have to provide more housing. It's coming. So, yeah, I see no harm in signing on.
Thank you for that. And certainly we've identified that as part of our strategic plan. So very much in line. And I'm assuming that there's flexible timelines on this as well. So as we're waiting for a number of policies to come forward too, that they can land. And so, Councillor Todd, can I ask you to put the motion on the table for us? If that was your intention.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I didn't give any wording, Shrishma, and I know you love it when I don't do that. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, so I would move that, oh, thank you. You guys are the best. That council endorsed Mayor Hankivsky joining the founding mayors group as part of the From the Ground initiative, and that staff be directed to communicate to the organizers of the From the Ground initiative that the municipality of Port Hope wishes to participate in the initiative, and that Mayor Hankivsky will join the group of founding mayors in support of efforts to address housing affordability and related affordability challenges facing municipalities across Canada. Assuming we can still be part of the founding mayors, that's the one part that I would just question as to whether or not that's done, because the conference has now completed. Just, yeah.
Belatedly.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Does somebody want to second that motion? Councillor Darrell is going to second that motion. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is passed. And thank you, and I appreciate the deferral. Moving on to 12.2, Report ES 0826, Report Hope Atomic Energy Canada Limited, ACL Settlement Agreement. I know this is going to be a longer discussion this evening, so I'm going to start by asking whether or not council have any questions or comments about this agreement. Councillor Less.
Well, I have many questions and comments, but I think I'll boil it down to one. A few meetings back, it was suggested that council's involvement in the CAC, the Citizens Action Committee, was to date in name only. We had never met. Was not thrust upon us, but put upon us that you are the CAC. Secondly, we charged staff to recommend a course of action so that CAC had a set of guidelines, that the staff would give us a set of guidelines to work with within the CAC to help resolve homeowner issues with CNL. So I guess my question is, why have we not involved the CAC and the residents in participating in the settlement agreement before we agree to a settlement agreement?
I think there's a couple things I want to say about this. Councillor Lass, one is just a clarification of the fact that the terms of reference for the CRC are going to be coming to the next council meeting, as well as a meeting schedule is going to be put into place for moving forward with that. I think there's a general point of information that we can share about all of the agreements that are negotiated. According to the 2001 original agreement, under Section 10, all negotiations on this file are done in confidence. That was set in stone in the original agreement. That's not something that this council has come up with. This is part of the original 2001 agreement. I don't know if the CAO wants to add anything to that, or if the solicitor would like to add anything to that.
I think I just do want to reiterate that, yeah, that there has been a historic precedence based on the 2001 agreement. These are all in confidence. The CAC is a very public process, predominantly to address resident issues and concerns. As the staff report, relates, this isn't a bonus to the municipality. The original agreement is still in place. All the terms and conditions are up to the 20 years for residents, and this is in excess. A great win for the community because now we have another up to 100 years. So I think that's the nuance. It's not a conversation that's a negative conversation. It was a deliberate. Not to have a public conversation, but we are bound by these agreements. I think it's a very positive term moving forward.
Councillor Clare.
Sorry, we agreed earlier, Les, but I think I need to, it's important to correct something that you said. We were involved in the negotiation, and that took place in closed session, but it is included in the minutes for our April 21st meeting. So that is public information that council received updates about the ongoing negotiations with AECL and provided direction. So I think just want to be very clear that it's not that this took place without council and this acting as CAC. Council was involved and council did provide direction. So we were part of this.
Councillor Lass.
And that is true. I verify that you're quite correct. However, new information came out in that period between April and now regarding the CAC and how we wanted to involve our residents in a more meaningful level. That was my point.
Okay. I think I just return back to the larger point around what were the requirements of the original 2001 agreement under Section 10. I don't know if our solicitor wants to further comment on that at all. Nope? Okay. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Moving on to other questions or comments about the agreement. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm really proud of this negotiation. I think this is an important continuation of the work that happened to extend special circumstances to owner-directed special circumstances, trying to make sure that the project is really providing property owners with the flexibility that they need to make the right decisions on their property, and to do so with the confidence that not only will the major expense of the soil, finding a place to store contaminated soil, that's the real burden with respect to contaminated soil. Digging up soil, putting it in a truck, that's not really the difficult part. It's finding under all of the regulations a place where you can take that soil to be stored. And the fact that we can now make choices as property owners to say, I would like to protect this feature on my property, and I now have the security of knowing that should ever in my lifetime or my children's lifetime, this is a generational protection, that soil will be accepted by the federal government, and the liability will rest with the federal government to store that soil long term. This is, I think, a win for residents and responds to input from the community that we were receiving over many years. I think the timing of this coming forward is also I think it's come at a time when we're hearing a lot more from residents as the residential phase of the cleanup accelerates into new neighborhoods. I just want to make it clear that this is something that was done to respond to concerns that we've been hearing over a long period of time. It's not the only piece of the puzzle. It's not designed to solve all of the concerns or challenges that residents are feeling that have been coming forward in recent months. But I do think it's an important piece of the puzzle as we continue to work towards right-sizing the project, which has been adopted as a strategic priority in our strategic plan.
And I'm going to get back to you, Councillor Less, in just a second. I want to add a couple of things to that, is that it is historic to be able to get this kind of agreement in place for 100 years. That was really hard fought. We did not have anything close to that kind of, as Councillor Clare says, intergenerational agreement in place. This in no way removes responsibility from Canada, the government of Canada. For up to 100 years, they will continue to provide storage for that material. And we are in active pursuit of developing a very fulsome strategy for the removal of waste up to that 100 years and the transportation of that waste for up to 100 years. Those are the kinds of guarantees you don't get anywhere these days. So it is landmark, it is historic, it is not removing responsibility from the government of Canada on this point. So I wholeheartedly agree with you on that piece of it. But in case there is any misunderstanding, we are continuing to work on a strategy for ensuring that beyond having the facility open for the waste, that there will be a plan for residents on how to excavate and transport that waste as well. So that's just an important point I wanted to add to this line of conversation. Councillor Less.
Well, I applaud you on the transportation and the storage of 100 years. I guess the real issue is the excavation, and some people have chosen not to have remediation. Some people have had it forced upon them through special circumstance. That CNL have said, no, we are not going to remove that. It is now your responsibility. And those are the crux of the issues that face a number of residents that have not been addressed with this agreement. And we've had a number of letters that I hope will be responded to either in written form or through council when it comes up to the committee of the whole or the next council meeting or whatever, to try and answer these questions.
Thank you for that. And I do want to touch on special circumstances for a few minutes and then link that to some of the issues around letters of compliance. So those are two other topics that I'd like us to have a conversation on at the table. So it is true that there have been more instances of special circumstances as the project has unfolded, and that's largely because of the increase in volume of cleanup of private properties. But what I've asked the solicitor to do is to clarify under which circumstances, special circumstances, can be used for this project so that we're all on the same page and we have clarity around that. So I'm going to turn that over to our solicitor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I won't get into every option, but essentially there's a special circumstances protocol which sets out the situations in which special circumstances can be applied. Some of them are situations where a property owner can request a special circumstance, and then there's other situations where, for example, one moment, let me just pull up the. So, for example, there's a physical constraint, so a requirement to maintain structural integrity or stability of property. That is one situation where an SC would be applied. An operational constraint below a specified depth is not reasonably feasible. An environmental constraint, for example, removal of LLRW would have a detrimental impact on an environmental feature. Social or heritage constraint, there would be a high community impact with low safety return. And then the property-driven scenarios, so if access is not provided by a property owner, then the special circumstance would be applied. Or a property owner requests that it be applied, that would be another scenario.
Thank you for that. And I want to just link this a little bit to another issue that has come up, and that's around compliance letters that are being generated for property owners, because it is obviously, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There are properties that have very different circumstances, but at the end of the day, there is a consistency in concerns from residents around what kind of letters are being produced by ACL and CNL, and what that means in terms of property value, what it means about risk and liability, what it means for future sales, and the list goes on. I share those concerns very much, and I want to share with you that in the last actually 24 hours, I have been working very diligently with our MPP and Minister through also the municipality to convene a high-level meeting that involves, and I should say that I've had individual meetings with the CEOs and presidents of these entities, but the key for me moving forward is to have everybody in the same room, including all of their lawyers, not to have one-off conversations, but to have everybody in the room at the same time. So the meeting is being convened with ACL, CNL, CNSC, their lawyers, appropriate ministerial representation from both the province and the federal government, and from members of the municipality, to have a roadmap and a path forward for those letters of compliance, to give residents the assurances around environmental concerns and around health concerns, to have a path forward to try to mitigate some of the concerns that have been raised by the public. This is going to be a really important meeting because the content of those letters is extraordinarily important for the residents, and we have a responsibility to residents for them to feel confident that whatever is on their property meets certain standards and that there are no environmental and health risks that have not been addressed in a satisfactory manner. And I'm going to just end there and also ask the CAO for a few further comments on this point.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I mean, we've had multiple conversations. I think the key point of this is that we're having everyone together at the same point. The mayor and I had conversations at the Canadian Nuclear Association conference directly with the president of CNSC, the ACL, and we are going to continue those. And that fulsome conversation with everyone at the table will help define put a stake in the ground and make sure that we have concerted effort across all the key stakeholders and key players in this. I think that's the main motivation for that, and I think we will accomplish that.
Councillor Less.
Well, if that's the case, and I applaud you on getting a table together such as that, I would say we'd have more bargaining power if we do not accept this agreement until after that meeting.
CAO.
Through you, Chair, council direction, the agreement has been signed and agreed to through council direction.
I'd like to see where we recommended that. I can't recall voting on that.
I'm going to turn it over to the clerk. Would you be able to bring up the meeting dates during which this agreement was discussed and voted on?
The last time the meeting was discussed was related to, the last time the item was discussed, ongoing AECL negotiations, was April 21st, I believe, was that, and the council closed minutes were approved just earlier today.
Any other questions or comments from around the table?
No.
I'm sure that the clerk will be able to provide just all the background in terms of the different meetings at which this was discussed and when all the voting and agreements were made in relation to this file, but it was council direction. Okay. So seeing no other comments on this at the moment, can I get a mover and seconder to receive this report for information? Moved by Councillor Todd. Second by Councillor Darrell. Any further questions or comments on this? All in favor? Thank you, and that is passed. Moving on to report 12.3. ES 0926, re-telecommunication structure, license agreement, and municipal access agreement with Bell Mobility. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding this report? I have a quick question that I'm going to ask. Just wondering whether or not the amount that was negotiated for this agreement is kind of standard market value. Did we do well? I just want to know that, you know, in the spirit of discussing your agreements, that we did the best job that we could for the municipality. Or if you can just explain what were the terms used for this negotiation.
Happy to. The revised agreement does permit the existing equipment to remain in place. The updated rate reflects the current market conditions and is considered fair.
Thank you for that clarification. I think that's really important to highlight. So does anyone else have anything further? Okay, the recommended motion is listed on the agenda. Can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Clare, seconded by Councillor Mink. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Moving on to 12.4, report LLS 2326, re-amps parking traffic bylaw report. Does council have any questions or comments regarding this report? All right, someone has to start. Councillor Darrell.
So, question I have is we have a fair amount of properties in Port Hope with really restricted parking access, shared driveways, just no actual parking for their homes. How does this affect on-street parking? Like, let's say, for example, Baird Street. Like, how does it affect situations like that moving forward?
Madam Mayor, through you. So For the restricted street parking, basically what we reviewed streets that, one, first of all, didn't have driveways. So for those streets, we will be granting 12-month parking permits for on-street parking. We have also developed a plan to put signage up on those streets, like South Street, Brown Street, to restrict parking from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. during snow events. And we will work with those residents on where they should park so that the plows can come in and plow during the day. The focus here is for keeping the streets clear. So there's parking permits in places for areas that have very restrictive parking. We're going to be working with residents to relocate them, sign the street properly, and look at plowing those streets during the day.
Do you have a follow-up on that? No? Good. Okay. Councillor Mink?
So, through the chair, thank you very much for the report and reports. There's multiple attachments. And for the community presentations as well. I attended, I think, one of them. So I struggle a little bit because I understand the need for this. I think in two ways. There's snow clearing and having the streets closed. There's emergency access and those type of needs. And there's also those complaints that I receive that a neighbor has permanently parked their car in front of a neighbor's house because they want to use their driveway and their garage for other purposes. And that property in front of a neighbor's house is public property. It's not their reserved space, and that's a problem. Through my time on council, I hear numerous concerns and complaints that we have a lack of parking options for residents, for business owners, and for tourism. Let's be real, if we want tourism, we need parking to be plentiful. And I almost feel like as I read through this, it's very heavy on you can't do this, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, and then if you appeal. And it's very much restriction focused, and I'm not seeing the solutions coming first. Where can we improve parking? And looking at this very creatively. We have a ton of different parks where we could actually say to residents, you may park in our park between these hours, and especially during snow events. And I think coming up with those solutions first and presenting those alternatives before we come up with the restrictions would give me a lot more confidence in approving this bylaw at this time.
Madam Mayor, this report is strictly for information, so we could begin these discussions. We're not looking for approval for right now, but we have already begun researching parking lots that can be utilized for permits, especially in the downtown core for residents that don't have driveways.
Yes, go ahead.
And I guess another question I had, just a thought, is we had a land inventory, land surplus inventory, and we did identify some little pieces of land, especially on laneways, that weren't suitable for building. Has there been any thought maybe those little lots and laneways could be community parking spaces, especially like up in the Elizabethtown, I think they call it, up there where there's laneways and people can get off the roads and use these little residential parking lots? We don't have that, in my understanding, around town. And yes, downtown Port Hope is important, but some of these neighborhoods like Peacock Avenue and so on, having residential parking lots throughout the community may also assist. And that's what I would like to see, that creativity coming before we approve something that has so many restrictions.
So the part of the public engagement was to hopefully receive enough engagement from the public to identify the areas where we would run into those problems. As the report specified, we received about 133 comments. Unfortunately, it's less than 1% of our general population. I was hoping for a lot more feedback regarding these, but with what we received, most of them were around the downtown core area and the areas that didn't have on-street parking. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to tour at night to see how many people are actually parking on the roadways at night. I think from some of the feedback from areas that aren't really affected, there's a lot of assumption of there's going to be a problem, and we can't identify what that problem is until we're hearing feedback from those residents. The suggestion would be also to do a one-year pilot project on this, because we have to report back to council every year on our AMPS reports. That we bring a report being, this is how many tickets were issued, and if there is an actual problem that we need to find a solution for.
Okay, I'm going to continue around the horseshoe. I'll start at the very end with Councillor Les, if you've got any comments on this.
Yeah, I know that there's the four main issues regarding on-street parking and people without driveways, etc. And I know that your report that is quite lengthy, and I can't blame people for not reading the whole thing. And may have missed the key elements that you are developing or trying to develop solutions to the problem of parking and make sure that we can still get the streets plowed in the wintertime. So that's the essence of the problem, and that by accepting this report for information, we're just allowing you to go to the next step of trying to get the resolution. Yep. Is that true?
Yeah, the whole point of this report was strictly to get council's feedback and hear what you're hearing from your constituents, and then try to work on some solutions and bring even further light to why this parking bylaw should come forward and hopefully resolve all the issues. But I do want council to understand, just like any bylaw, we're not going to make everybody happy, but the point for us is we want the roads cleared. We would like access for our emergency vehicles. And unfortunately, just because of the size of our department, we are doing our absolute best to try and gather as much information as humanly possible, but there is going to be an understanding that we won't get it right the first time, but we're not going to stop until we are, and we're satisfied with it. Like, this isn't just going to be a one-time, hey, this is in place, great, we're going to be off to the races. No, we're going to be working with residents all the way through this new process so that we can bring forth the best type of enforcement for both residents and operators that plow.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask a really quick follow-up to what you were just speaking about. Can you share with us what is some of our risk and liability if we are not clearing our roads, and if there's any impediment to emergency responsiveness and emergency vehicles being able to get through?
I wish I had the chief here right now, but so, I mean, we've had streets where we've had cars parked both sides and fire trucks can't get through. Plows have not plowed streets because cars are parked on the roadways, and you're 16 feet for a plow with a wing down. The hope is so worst case scenario, streets don't get plowed, we get an ice storm, it's iced over, somebody slips, car accidents happen, somebody plows it into somebody, and we're liable. That's kind of worst case scenario. Other worst case scenarios that we run into are if we don't have the streets plowed properly, what ends up happening is one of the main complaints that I get is from seniors is their neighbors park their vehicles basically to block the windrow from their driveway, which forces the windrow into their neighbor's property. And I've received complaints from ladies in their 80s. They can't shovel themselves out. And I wish to say that if we were living in the 1980s, we would have people coming around and shoveling driveways to help out the neighbors. But we don't. We're in 2026, and you know, our departments have grown, municipal law enforcement, because we tend to get more complaints about things like that. Neighbors don't talk to each other. They don't help out. It's unfortunate. But this is what we look at. We get older people out there shoveling these huge windrows, heart attack. We don't want those things to happen. That's worst case scenario.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know exactly where we stand from a risk and liability of emergency vehicles not being able to pass through in a timely fashion, and you know, who's liable when that happens. That's a piece of information I'm most interested in knowing. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. My apology, Dave, I'm not going to look at you because I can't talk into this thing at the same time. So I totally appreciate the effort and the work that went into this because, having gone through it, there's a tremendous amount of work that went through this. So thanks for that. I also appreciate the fact that, we have the opportunity to give some feedback so that when it comes back, we can, tighten it up if need be. And Dave, the other thing I know about you is that, you're always really good about listening as, between now and whatever time this comes back. So I know we'll always have these conversations. When I look at it, I appreciate the fact that we are solving a problem. My concern is that we're creating a new problem in solving a problem. And that's what I would like us to look at. I think when this thing comes back, we just need to pull the through line. So it feels as though we've run half a race, which is here's the problem, here's a solution to that problem. But now we need to look at, and so what's the solution to the next problem? And so, from an innovative point of view, because we're Port Hip, and so we're going to look at innovative solutions, I would love to see, what's the next step of, okay, so how are we going to be able to accommodate the people, who may be in, a more precarious position because we've shuffled some of this around, as well as we recognize that there are properties that don't have full parking. Oftentimes those are smaller lots. Looking at, what are the voices and what are the people who are going to be most impacted on this. I would also have a concern on how this is going to impact people's interest in adopting ARUs. We're working through right now trying to get more people to take on ARUs. I would love to see what impact this is going to have on that, because I would imagine there would be some. So I think there's implications on here. So I commend you for the work that we've done already. I think we're moving in the right direction. And when this comes back to council, that would be some of my feedback and the things that I'll be looking for when it returns.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. And these are. I think you're raising some good issues around what is the problem, how we're solving it. But I think maybe in certain instances around this, at least, who trumps in terms of either considerations or rights? So, is it that we have to say that whether we like the implications or not, that there are minimum road standards that have to be maintained, and what happens when those aren't maintained? Does that take precedent over some of these other things, or how do you balance it all when there are legal liabilities that we know are linked to some of those standards? Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think it can be a yes and. So recognizing that we have to take that into consideration. Is this the only way forward, or what else haven't we thought of? And that's back to staff because they're the experts in this and looking around for other municipalities. But if this is the only solution, then where can we look at opportunities to make sure that we're not disadvantaging people in the meantime? Because I don't think we necessarily want to do an all or nothing.
No, I agree, but we also don't want to disadvantage people's access to emergency services, especially those that are really vulnerable. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with the way that this discussion is unfolding, because we are referring to things as being established that haven't actually been established in the information provided to council. So, for me, we've completely skipped the step of understanding what is it, the problem that we're trying to solve, what is the scope and scale of that problem, where is that problem taking place, and can we look at a more targeted, surgical approach to solving the problem where it exists. So far, I've seen no evidence come forward to say that this is a community-wide problem impacting every street in Port Hope, but the solution we're being presented will impact every street in Port Hope. And to me, I need to first understand what is the problem, how many streets, how many complaints, how many cases where there is that risk of liability. Just naming there could be liability, to me, is not justification for something that will create significant impacts for almost all residents. Even those of us with parking have house guests. We throw parties. We have people come to visit. We have overnight visitors, all these things. We will all be impacted. So if we're even going to consider this, I think we first need to be convinced that there's a sizable problem that needs to be addressed. That said, this has come forward, so I am prepared to provide feedback on the proposed solution. I will also say at the outset that I don't think council should be presented with a bylaw for approval without the corresponding permitting system. To me, those need to go hand in hand, and it's concerning to me that talk about permitting is now very much sort of talk. It's not actually documented, and the current draft of the bylaw says we may develop a permitting system. It doesn't even commit to shall. So I think that's a real risk, and we need to make sure that we are very clear about what we will do from a permitting before we approve any bylaw. That said, the concerns I have, I want to link them to 4 strategic priorities that have already been established by this council, embedded in various council-approved strategies, including our strategic plan. I think the proposed parking bylaw is in direct contradiction with 4 of our strategic priorities, and I think will actually undermine our ability to advance those goals. I'll start with housing. Virtually every current guide on accelerating affordable housing recommends reducing or, in fact, completely eliminating parking mandates. That strategy only works if there are flexible and affordable on-street options available. A restrictive on-street parking regime works against that goal directly and could undermine our progress on our almost #1 strategic priority of housing for all. The second is environment. Pushing residents towards paving their yards, which is what we see in other jurisdictions that have banned street parking, to create off-street parking has direct consequences for stormwater, green space, and our infrastructure deficit. It's not only a minor concern, but it is in fact a major one, because that will create more pressure on our built stormwater management systems as we have less drainage in what is now green space on front yards. And I think that that undermines our strategic goals around environmental sustainability and directly contradicts recommendations in our Community Climate Action Plan adopted by this council. Vision Zero and active transportation connected to safe streets, again, a strategic plan goal that is also reflected in our Community Climate Action Plan. Parked cars are one of the most effective and the least effective tools for traffic calming on residential streets. Drivers slow down when navigating around parked vehicles, and that friction reduces speeds and creates safer conditions for pedestrians, cyclists, and children. Removing this from our toolbox, as we have already commissioned a Vision Zero strategy, to me will make it harder to achieve our goals for safe streets and active transportation, and at the very least will make it significantly more expensive to the residents of Port Hope to try to advance those goals. Finally, I do also want to pick up on Councillor Todd's comments around equity and inclusion. This will disproportionately negatively impact residents who already have the fewest options. It skews heavily towards renters, people who are living in multi-generational households, often because of affordability pressures already, and those in older neighborhoods where off-street parking was never part of how the community was built. I think we have fallen a bit short to date on our commitments in the EDI framework of ensuring that those most impacted are consulted. So I would encourage us to do more work on that front. But I also would say that it is, I think, in contradiction to principles of inclusion to ask a group of residents who are already facing increased challenges to bear the burden, I guess, of impact of a policy like this, where it is, I guess, an already vulnerable or negatively impacted group of residents in our community. So for me, those are 4 very clear strategic priorities that I think would be negatively impacted by this bylaw. And I think we need to think very carefully about how we weigh that against the problem we're trying to solve. And I would need an awful lot more information on that to be able to do so effectively.
Thank you, Councillor Clare, and I wonder if you'd like to respond to any of those points.
Yeah, well, the first point I'd like to make is this is not being brought forth for approval right now. It's being brought forth for information. So the fact that there was an implication that it was, there is no being brought forth. The second thing is the permits are written into the bylaw. They say shall because I haven't gotten council, but I apologize. They say may because I haven't been given council directions on whether that's going to be approved or not. Once it is approved, they will be written in stone. The permitting system is the software that I needed feedback from council on whether we're going to approve because there's a cost to it. So there's a lot of things. But addressing the issues that you brought forward, that's what this is for, and I'd be happy to put something together for you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Mink.
Thanks. So I just want to circle back to my original comments. When I'm looking, I mentioned parking on municipal land and in municipal parks. And when I'm looking at the bylaw, it specifically has wording saying, no person shall park a vehicle in a municipal parking lot for longer than the time permitted by the authorized signs. Doesn't explain what that is. And then it goes on to say all the restrictions for parking on municipal lots, but nowhere here does it say municipal lots will be available so those are the little things that I'm missing that I would like to see to give me confidence that yes, there will be restrictions, but there will also be permissions. If I pass this now, I mean, I have no guarantee that that's going to come. And then, so one moment, and then when I get into the political interference one, and I completely understand that there's a legislative component of that. But when we're doing something by trial, let's wait and see how it works out. People are going to come to the councillors with complaints. And I just see that being a very gray area when someone comes to me, I got this parking ticket, I didn't understand, or where am I supposed to park? And then council brings forward these concerns, and then we're told political interference, step out. So it doesn't give me confidence. It's not connecting, I guess, for myself at this point.
So to explain on the political interference, an open discussion at council about an issue that a resident has is not political interference. It's stating a problem that council is speaking to. But if your friend or somebody you knew came to you about an issue with a ticket, and then you came to me and was like, I think you should quash this ticket, that's political interference. Or weighing in on how an adjudication should be, that's the portion of political interference. Having the open discussion in council about portion of the parking bylaw is not political interference. It's bringing a problem to council.
And I understand that, and I agree. I just think through the trial pilot program that there will be those conversations where an individual will come to me and say, this parking ticket is unfair. And it leaves me in a position, if I'm here when that happens, to not be able to help that person. And I understand. I understand that part of this is legislative, but I just don't see that window for where we can help those people in those individual circumstances. And then if you could also comment on the parking, the municipal parking. If you could.
So for the municipal parking, there are going to be lots that get assigned. So they will not have the signage that's restrictive. The reason why that's written that way is if we want, say, town hall cleared, plowed at night, we would put up signage restricting no parking in town hall 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. If there's no signage, there's no violation. So that's why it's worded in such a way. We have to sign it properly because residents or anybody staying over has to know that there's a violation. So if it's not signed, there's no violation.
Thank you. I think we've had a fulsome discussion around the table. I think everybody's had a chance to provide some thoughts and feedback, and you've heard that. And so at this point, our task is to receive this for information. So can I get a mover and seconder for that? Okay, well, we're going to get it on the table first.
Yeah, I appreciate that the intent in bringing it forward is to solicit input from council, and the intention is there for staff to take what came out of tonight's discussion and come back. But I think for the purpose of clarity and transparency with the public, to make sure that that is known, I would like, instead of receiving for information, simply to move that council refer report LLS 2326 back to staff for further review and consideration of the comments provided by council at the June 16th council meeting. Just so that it is very clear in the minutes, and for anybody who hasn't listened to the deliberations today, that that is the intent and that this input is going to be considered, as opposed to the, people find the receive for information is somewhat confusing sometimes.
I just want to make a comment on that. I appreciate your intent, Councillor Clare, but I think it's a little bit disrespectful to staff to assume that they're not hearing what has been said around this table, and we'll be bringing this forward. We have no reason that David has in the past taken our feedback and brought it forward, and so I think the CAO is sitting here listening to the feedback. I think that our solicitor is sitting here listening to the feedback, and I think we have a staff member who's written the report that's listening to the feedback, and I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're listening to these concerns in a very legitimate way, because if they don't, when it comes back to us, we're going to bring up the same concerns over again, and it's not going to pass at this table.
If I can respond. I think you've really skewed my comments, Mayor. I in no way suggested that staff would not otherwise take our comments to heart. I think, the manager, supervisor bylaw, manager of bylaw has been very clear about that. And I in no way indicated any distrust that staff would do so. I was very clear. The reason for the alternative motion is so that that is reflected in the minutes for public understanding, so that members of the public who are following this, they understand that that is the next step in the process, because receive for information does not provide that clarity. So it is no way to suggest that I don't trust staff are listening and are going to do that work. It's really for clarity of members of the public. We often hear questions about what does receive for information mean, and this is simply an attempt to make sure that the minutes properly reflect the intent as expressed by staff.
Okay, so just as a point of order to the clerk, which motion would we be considering first in this process?
Madam Mayor, in accordance with the procedure bylaw, if there is a motion on the floor, if there is a referral motion, then that would have to be considered prior to the motion that is on the floor, which is to receive for information. In this case, Councillor Holloway Wadhwani has made the motion to refer. However, we would need a seconder for that motion prior to the consideration of the receive for information.
Just for the purposes then of clarity, we've got a motion on the table from Councillor Clare. Do you want to give some more precise wording around that?
Sure. That council refer report LLS 2326 back to staff for further review and consideration of the comments provided by council at its June 16th, 2026 meeting.
Do we want a moment just to get that up on the screen, or is everybody fully understanding that? Maybe we'll just give the clerk a second to put that up. Does that reflect your motion? Okay, so that is the motion on the table from Councillor Clare. Would somebody like to second that motion? Councillor Darrell, any further discussion on this? Councillor Less.
I think Councillor Clare is right. She's put some wording in there that protects us. And I would assume staff would have taken council's questions into consideration anyways, but I guess puts the nail in it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Mink seems to be also shaking her head, so I think you're, do you want to make a comment, or you just think, okay, go ahead?
Yeah, and I'm sitting here questioning, well, what's the difference, and are we going to start doing this with every motion? But I think that we come to this situation sometimes where we do receive it for information, and we didn't give the specific wording, and then over time, we're sitting here going, how did that happen, or why didn't that come back? So I appreciate the comment, and I understand where Claire is coming from, so thank you.
Okay, so we have the mover and seconder, all in favor, and that is passed. Moving on then to item number 13, the consent agenda, committee reports and recommendations. We have a consent agenda for the committee reports and recommendations. Council has an ability to pull an item under the consent agenda if they want to consider it separately. Any item removed will be addressed through the consent agenda motion. So would anybody like to pull any of the items? And those are 13.1 to 13.13. I do know that there's at least one item that's going to be pulled. Councillor Clare.
Yes, I'd like to pull item 13.6, the strategic asset management policy.
And Councillor Less.
Yes, I'd like to pull 13.5 regarding the Port Hope Racket Club dome projection project contribution.
Okay, anyone else like to pull any item? Okay, so are we going to do it in the numeric order, in the order that was requested?
Madam Mayor, my recommendation would be to move the rest of the items that are on the consent agenda and then consider item 13.5 and 13.6 separately. Madam Mayor, that would be, you got it, okay.
I'm just making a note. So we do have a recommended motion on the agenda to approve all the consent agenda items, but for 13.5 and 13.6 that will be considered separately. Can I get a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Less, seconded by Councillor Todd. All in favor? Thank you, and that is passed. So then we'll move on to item 13.5 that Councillor Less has requested to pull.
Yes, it's a small point. It's under the recommended motion 3 that council directs staff to finalize the 20-year lease agreement. I suggest that that should be 22-year lease agreement with the Racket Club. The first 2 years being 0, the remaining years being 10,000, and that'll come up whole to 200,000 over the 20 years, or over the 22 years.
Do you want to provide a little bit of background as to how you
Yeah, if we, Councillor Todd brought this up, so he's the brains behind this, that if we had allowed the motion to go through as it is, the first 2 years would be lease-free, and the second to the third to the 20th year, which would be 18 years at 10,000, would be 180,000 as opposed to the 200,000 that we're loaning them.
Okay, so brains behind the motion, would you like to second this? Councillor Todd, would you like to second that?
I would happily listen to everyone.
Okay. Yes, sorry, we're okay, well, think about that as we're having the conversation. Councillor Clare. I thought the hand was up. Any further thoughts on this?
Do you have a motion that could be put up on the screen?
Sure, just rewrite the current. I'd rewrite.
Sorry, Councillor, yes, microphone.
The motion for recommendation 3 and change the 20-year lease to a 22-year lease agreement.
Director, did you have any comments on this just before we go to next steps?
That opportunity. I don't have concerns with that. We were initially targeting a 20-year agreement that would essentially be renegotiated after the 20-year term. So if it's 2 years, the additional 10,000 per year for those 2 years would essentially extend it. So I'm agreeable to be able to have that communication with the club if council gives us that direction.
I may not be here in 22 years.
Councillor Clare.
I'm just thinking out loud on this, but I appreciate that the idea of making the lease agreement value match essentially the contribution, the upfront contribution from the municipality. I appreciate that. But if there was an intent to renegotiate the lease agreement after 20 years, presumably after 20 years, 10,000 isn't going to be kind of what it is today, and we might be in a position to increase that lease amount. Could we, in our intent to sort of equalize, could we actually be costing ourselves revenue once
Well-
we get to that 21st and 22nd year?
If you want to play honest with the racket club, they're borrowing 200, we're asking them to pay 200 back, and we're not talking about what's going to happen in the 23rd year or the 21st year. So maybe it. So
If I can add comment to that as well, there is a provision within the lease for notice for renegotiation earlier than a 20-year term as well, so that is something that we can monitor on an ongoing basis.
none of us may be here at that point in time, so that's why I'd like to nail it down now.
Okay, so we do have the motion in front of us. Would somebody like to second this? Councillor Clare is going to second it. Any further conversation around this? Okay, all in favor? And that is passed. Moving on then to item 13.6 that Councillor Clare had wanted to pull. Councillor Clare?
Thank you. I have a small amendment to the proposed resolution that the clerk can share on the screen for everyone. But just by way of explanation, when the strategic asset management policy came forward at Committee of the Whole earlier in the month, I had one concern, which was that the climate change section framed responsibility primarily around risk management and mitigation, but said nothing explicit about climate adaptation. And for a document that's guiding infrastructure decisions that will have impacts for decades to come, and we all know about the additional expense to taxpayers when infrastructure isn't as resilient as it could be, it felt to me like a meaningful gap. So I had the opportunity to meet with staff in the weeks between committee and coming here to council. And I want to thank staff, including our Manager of Asset Management, Director of Finance, and CAO for taking the time to consider my input on this and to reflect on it and come back with a solution. So my proposed amendment, which is to update the header of the section, relevant section to specify climate change mitigation and adaptation, is in fact the language that staff shared back to me. And while it's a simple change, I think it's important as it signals clearly that both are in scope and it sets the foundation for increasingly climate smart asset management going forward. And so I'm pleased to bring this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Clare. Would somebody like to second that? Councillor Darrell. Any further discussion on this? I think it also opens up a whole host of granting and funding opportunities as well. Councillor Mink.
Yeah, I just want to support Claire with this. I do have conversations when people hear climate change and they often say, oh, no more money spent on that. But as soon as I explain when it comes to infrastructure and making those choices of infrastructure that will mitigate further decay of infrastructure or smart choices, immediately that conversation changes once they see that. So I think that it is important that we start using that language more often and that we understand what that means. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Okay, so we have a mover and seconder on that. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. So now we're moving on to item 14. There are no notice of motions this evening, and at this point, we are going to recess for 5 minutes. We're going to move on to item number 15, tracking report on outstanding motions. 15.1, report LLS 2426, re-council direction list quarterly update. June 2026. And I'm going to start off our conversation on this item, partly because this is something that I brought to the table for a motion and for action. And I want to start off by saying it's a wonderful development to finally see some kind of tracking system for the municipality. I looked through all the items. It's a tremendous amount of work to bring together that kind of document, especially this late into a council term. There was a lot of valuable information within that tracker, but I was left with a number of questions that I was hoping that I might be able to get answered. First is, what is the mechanism for ensuring that no motions are missing from that tracker? Because I did note a number of motions were in fact missing from the tracker. Secondly, I think there's a really important distinction between an inventory that tracks all the motions that are passed by council versus motions that are passed by council that presumably lead to some kind of transformative change and action. And so when I had looked at the way in which the classification system was organized, there was an indication of completion on a number of motions, which to my mind are never complete because they're ongoing activities for a municipality. And I was expecting to see in the commentary section some very concrete information about what actions have been taken in relation to a motion that has been passed. And in not all instances was that clear. So I'm wondering if we can get a little bit more nuanced in the motions, the inventory in the data tracker around motions that are passed, that are, for example, declarations, but even declarations arguably have no substance if they don't lead to any kind of change. There's other motions that are never complete because they're ongoing, whether it's the EDI policy, for example, or whether it's UNDRIP, et cetera. There are a number of those kinds of motions that should be ongoing for council. And then an ability for us to see through the commentary section what actual changes and actions have been taken in relation to the motion. So these are the kinds of nuances that I was hoping that we can see as the work continues with this very valuable tool. And then finally, here's one for the CAO. Is this something that we can use AI for to ensure accuracy in terms of some of the tracking mechanism?
So, thank you, to you, Chair. Yeah, first of all, whatever technology tools, like this document is a working, living document. So we appreciate the commentaries coming back to improve it. It's only been in place since fall of last year. Like we've been working on it. It is a manual effort to go back and try and pull the motions that were approved and make sure we're tracking them. Yes, some may have got missed, but we're working on that. Yes, we can use technology to help us, make sure we don't miss anything. But overall, it's a working document, and we appreciate your feedback and keep it going and living, because this is a good best practice in municipal government.
Any other questions? Or Councillor Todd?
Thank you. I also appreciate the document. I have one maybe recommendation or piece of feedback, which would be on the ETA of completion. If the marker changes, could we simply strike out the ETA and put a new one in so that we see that, if an ETA happens to change? Because in some cases, appreciating the fact that we were hoping to have it done by a certain time, situations came up, we had to move it, and then we can just notice that it has been moved. That would be helpful for me.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Any other questions or feedback on this, Councillor Mink?
Well, two questions. So I don't know if now is the time to bring it up, but of course we have a motion that was made in the last term of council that's not on this one, and it's not anywhere. So that's sort of one of my questions. How do we track something that was made from a previous council, and now we're going into yet a new term, and there's still no tracking of that one? And the second is more sort of, now that we have this in place, and we kind of talked about the centralized customer service, and from a council point of view, I always find I have sort of a report and issue things that come up that people bring to my attention, that I send emails to different directors about these issues. It's not a motion, it's just that these are issues, these are opportunities, and quite often the staff member will come back and say, oh yeah, we're on that, or we're looking at that. But sometimes they get lost as well. So is this a next step to have sort of a centralized place where council can sort of report those little issues that aren't necessarily a motion?
CAO, I think you probably have a lot to say about it.
Yeah, no, not a lot. I will say centralized customer service. That's the whole intent of it. We don't want to use the council agenda to bring those, report and issue problems. It's not the venue for that. We need to create the new venue. We're working towards that. That is the goal. Yeah, we wouldn't want to clog up a council agenda with those minor reported issues, but fair enough. The tracking, you get a complaint from a resident, you feed it to staff. It sometimes gets lost in the multiple emails in the abyss, and that's what the value of the centralized customer service is, to track it, case manage it, and make sure it gets resolved. So, coming.
And are we to assume that there'll be some, reporting out on the data from a centralized customer service portal so that we can have the numbers, the responses, the results, all of those sorts of things?
That is the intent. As we start building up the data set, you will have more data than you will want. But we can report it by council, we can report it by ward, we can report it by issue, we can do all sorts of things. It's just a matter of building up the data set, and that is the intent.
That's great. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I have a question about one particular item. I think it's all great, and I think this is a really good process, and I'm thrilled to have it. There's one item, if I might, flag, which is number 12. It's currently highlighted in green as being complete, and I think it's with respect to a notice of motion that I brought forward with Councillor Todd, and one of the components of that notice of motion was the establishment of a housing committee to examine issues along the full spectrum of shelter and housing in our community for the purpose of advising council and staff. And the explanation for it being marked as complete refers to the intermunicipal task force. The intermunicipal task force was established through a completely different motion in response to correspondence from Brighton on the basis of a motion that was brought forward by a colleague in Brighton and in Cobourg, and then subsequently by myself here in Port Hope. And I'm not sure that the work of the task force actually fulfills what was intended in that original notice of motion, because we're not specifically talking about the issues in Port Hope, nor providing direct advice to staff and council in Port Hope. We are in an indirect way, because we're providing recommendations overall for consideration across the county and looking at trends and ways to strengthen learning across the county, but I'm not sure that I would consider that to be a fulfillment of the original notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Clare, and I know that you're going to want to speak to this. I would suggest, because I had a list about some things, that maybe what we do is also individually, because all of us will find different things to provide some feedback on, and so as we continue to move forward, these are exactly the kinds of things that we need to be flagging. Back to you, Clerk.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that comment. I don't recall, I know that it was a while ago that the Intermunicipal Task Force and the report CS 1423 was written. It is my recollection then, when that report did come forward, that it did address the fact that the Housing Committee, because the Intermunicipal Task Force was being established, that was addressing the Housing Committee notice of motion. I believe the body of the report did state that. However, I will go back and I will take a look at that, and if necessary, we can follow up and change the color of that.
Can I suggest that each one of us goes through this, even maybe more carefully than you have, and look at any of the oversights or corrections that you'd like to see, and provide that feedback, because as has been pointed out, it's a living document, and isn't it great to actually have something like this on record? And Councillor Mink, I would suggest that there were far more things in the previous council that didn't get tracked and didn't translate over, and that won't be the issue moving forward because now we actually have a record of this. So great work, and we'll just build from strength to strength on this. Any further? Yes, CIO.
Just to Councillor Minks, I think we're aware of the one issue that we are caring for, and we are coming back to council with that one. But if there are other ones that you think are relevant and missed from a previous term of council, I'm looking at a couple of you guys, please share that with us, and we can investigate it. But the one we are aware of and addressing.
Okay, so the recommended motion is to receive this for information. Can I get a mover and seconder for this? Moved by Councillor Todd, second by Councillor Mink. All in favor? And that is passed. Moving on to item number 16, bylaws consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull a bylaw for further discussion this evening, 16.1 through to 16.6? Seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder for the bylaws? Moved by Councillor Todd, seconded by Councillor Darrell. All in favor? And that is passed. At this point, we're just going to pause for a few seconds and allow staff to leave before we enter into our final question period. Okay. It's now time for question period. Remember, the purpose of question period is to make inquiries of council members related to matters of municipal business. It's not meant to be an avenue to ask questions to staff. And if you have questions specifically for council members, you can ask them now. I want to highlight if there's anything about your questions that are operational in nature or more detailed than we can provide a fulsome accounting for at this table. We will take your name and contact information and make sure that we get a full and rigorous response to you. So we please ask that you identify your name, and our staff will turn on the microphone for you. Just before we go to the public, though, we will do as we always do and start with councillors and ask if any councillors have any questions around the table. Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So it's kind of weird to ask fellow councillors because I don't think you know the answer. But I have mentioned before that us having an opportunity to ask questions that may not be in the agenda doesn't really exist. But in lieu of the conversation today that we had around parking, and the conversation we just had about sort of issues and opportunities and nowhere does that get recorded, this parking lot that we have here at Lakeland Place, I've been asking actually for several years if we could get a block with a sign that says municipal parking, because people from the public, visitors to Port Hope, don't know that they can park in that lot. It's obvious to some people that work here at Town Hall and Council and so on, but I think that's a pretty easy ask. So I'm just wondering, I don't know, I'm asking Council if this is something we could do.
Thank you, Councillor Mink. We will refer that to the appropriate staff member and get you back a fulsome response to that very important and I think very reasonable question. Any other council members have any questions? Okay, we have no media. Hopefully, sometime in the very near future, we may start to have more media at our meetings, which is very exciting. And now we'll move on to questions from the public.
Good evening, Sarah Sculthorpe, Willow Beach Road. My question is to you, our mayor. Why did you stand on national news and support the world's largest nuclear plant when there has not been any community engagement to support that? You are our voice, and on national news, you supported the world's largest nuclear plant.
Thank you for your question. And would you like to refer back to the exact wording where I said that?
You said, I quote, once in a generation opportunity. being part of energy sovereignty and independence in Canada gives us a sense of pride. You said those words on national television.
And I think that there was a lot about that interview that was certainly missed a lot of the context of what I actually spoke to the CBC about. So let me clarify what I said to the CBC and what appeared in that actual clip. The first question I was asked was my position on supporting the project. I was very clear that I do not speak as an individual, that I speak as part of the council, and what the council has done to date is agreed to unanimously to be part of an engagement and a discussion around this project. When I was pressed again to ask if I individually supported this project, I was very clear to say I support this community as this community is going through this project. However, it is also the case that the idea of this project or the potential of this project is a once-in-a-generation opportunity. It is an opportunity that presents a lot of benefits for the municipality of Port Hope. I have been clear in all of my media interviews, including but not limited to the CBC, exactly where we are in the process.
May I continue? May I ask? So, on this sheet of paper, which thank you very much for sending this in our tax bills, on the February 12th, 2026, it talks about going into, so I'll just go to my question. What does it mean with council retaining full authority over all next steps? What are the next steps? And what does full authority mean?
That's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. One of the things that, as you probably are familiar with in terms of where we are in the process with OPG, is that we are in the impact assessment process. One of the things that has to happen for the impact assessment process is a number of different impact studies that will be undertaken. Those are yet to be fully identified, but there are going to be numerous studies, probably upwards of about 25. What we are advocating for is that for those studies to be led by the municipality of Port Hope, as opposed to being led by OPG. And at this point, just to ensure that you have a fulsome response, I'm also going to ask the CAO to offer any additional comments to that.
Through Mayor, yeah, exactly that. We are trying to maintain control of the process, not be railroaded by the process. And to the Mayor's point, there are numerous studies, peer reviews that we want to be at the table at and making sure we're at that. Our request is to be at the table on multiple stakeholder groups, whether it's federal government relations groups, to make sure we have a voice. And as you've seen as well through multiple council meetings, we are trying to get jurisdictional precedence and having a bigger say at the impact assessment process. And that's what we lobby for.
And one last thing that I just want to add to that is that we have negotiated a participation at the IAC governing table, which is the first time that any municipality that is a host community has negotiated that presence at that governance table.
Okay, so thank you. Excuse me. I am very concerned about the language that the municipality of Port Hope is using regarding OPG. For instance, again, at the bottom of this page, it says, "Will undertake broad community engagement starting in 2027 to help shape how the project could benefit Port Hope now and in the future." There is no discussion that this project is not going to happen. All the language on your website I asked the question, how can you write this on your website? It was taken down, I believe, on June the 12th. It was a job posting for a GIS, I believe, coordinator. And it states that living in Port Hope is lovely and and it says it's highlighted by the future development of the world's largest nuclear plant. And then it states that nuclear complements our strong economic agricultural base. I would love to know how nuclear complements our strong agricultural base, and how can you write on our municipal website a job posting that say Port Hope is a lovely place to live, and it's highlighted by the future development of the world's largest nuclear plant. So I'm here to question why and how is this language, why is it being put forth to every taxpayer in this municipality? Because to date, this municipality has not had a public meeting to get the feel of the residents and how they feel on this issue. OPG put out a survey from Newtonville Road to Balch Road, north to 401. From the east gate, main gate, into OPG, it is 8.4 kilometers to the Newtonville Road. From that same gate, it is 8.4 kilometers to Mill Street. And not one person past Balch Road got that survey. So nothing is being transparent with this project. And I have asked OPG why they did not allow those people to get that survey. Their comment, they're going to do a random survey of 600 people going to Peterborough, going to Belleville, all around us, surrounding us. We are the host community. We have 16,500 people, and they're going to do a random survey of 600 people that's not all Port Hope residents. We need to take charge.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the comments, in particular around the comms, the job description, and the question around OPG. We will ensure that we get a very detailed response back to you.
Cameron Green, Port Hope. For those of us who want to have an informed discussion about the upcoming Wesleyville project, I fully support what she says. First question, sort of off the cuff. The development charge conversation, is that to do up to 50% reduction in development charges in order to support more housing in Port Hope?
That's correct.
Okay. And I have no knowledge of this at all, other than watching Chex News tonight. And Peterborough is going forward with this. And they said that they made the decision now, but they don't know if they're going to be approved until after the June 19th date. And if they were not approved, they would be on the hook for the loss of the 50% in revenue. So I know we said there was no risk tonight, but
That is not my understanding.
Could be fake news.
And I think this is, early days, so they may have had a very different interpretation, but certainly in doing our due diligence, that was not the understanding. I think we have more of a risk of
it was pretty clear.
not succeeding with the application.
If you have contact at Peterborough, it'd probably be worth a phone call. I sent several questions to council to go over during your discussion this evening, and many of them were not touched, and so I hope you provide me some leniency with my questions. First, allow me to thank Les for being the voice of the 1,300 homes that are undergoing remediation, conservatively 2,000 residents. That from my vantage point as one of them, we have had no support from the town up to now. And you are aware that we had no CAC throughout the whole period, although we've been tried to tell that we were, but fortunately we're going to have one in a month. I can't wait for that. First question, I guess, is can we, given the change in contractor again now, as well as this settlement agreement and the special circumstances. You asked PHAI to have a town hall, they declined. Can municipality have a town hall so we can have a further discussion and more time than we have it this evening?
We'll take that to staff and respond back on that question.
Okay. I guess first question, does council agree that homeowners should be responsible in the future for waste left on their properties?
If you're talking about, are you speaking about the...
Special circumstances being imposed on homeowners.
Okay. I think that is an answer that I can't give you in a fulsome response, Cameron, this evening without actually consulting back with our legal team and with our staff and with CNL, because there are so many different moving pieces to the agreement. What are the reasoning behind the special circumstances that are used, and what are the options moving forward as well?
Fair enough. We don't have enough time to provide a fulsome answer tonight. And you know that I've had questions to staff since December on special circumstances that have gone unanswered. The council has been made aware of that. At some time, I hope that we can have a discussion, a fulsome discussion on this. Sorry, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I also think that there's a flip side to it, which is because there are increasing use of special circumstances throughout the municipality, that I think we need to have the part of the conversation that's been missing for me to date is what are the assurances that residents are going to be getting through letters of compliance, and what the content of those letters is going to be. And those letters will need to touch on the issues that you're raising.
I'm not sure what that means as a resident that has been informed that I have 3 special circumstances imposed on our property. Any letter of compliance I can't see being anything but saying that I have 3 special circumstances of which I'm going to be liable in the future.
I think there's actually active conversation that actually are looking at paths forward depending on the nature of what is on the property, but it's premature for me to comment on those because those are part of active ongoing conversations.
Okay, thank you. I'll jump forward
And
to one of them.
I believe that Councillor Clare also wants to say something about this.
Maybe I'll just ask a few questions and then council can...
Sorry, do you mind if we
Go
just
ahead.
go question
Sorry.
by question?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it's been a long day and we
My
want to make
apologies.
sure we're not missing the nuance of each of
Absolutely.
the questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just, building on the mayor's response. I think it's important to, whenever we're referring to special circumstances, to be specific about what type, because there are now, I think there are 2 different forms, right? There's the project imposed special circumstance, which is in the original protocol. Then there's the owner directed special circumstance, which was added to through amendment in 2022. And I think when you asked a question in your comment earlier in the agenda about the proliferation of more special circumstances, and I think my assumption is that it's because of the owner directed, but I don't think we've actually been given any information. I think that would be helpful to know what percentage, how many special circumstances are imposed and how many are actually residents taking some, autonomy here in making decisions right for them. I do want to flag too, there's also now a hybrid that has happened, and I'm aware of a number of these where there is an agreement between the property owner and the project that it doesn't make sense to remediate in a certain way. And I think, so in those cases, I've seen a couple of cases where the project is imposing the special circumstance, but it is in fact also owner directed. It's something that the owners were already interested in and considering. So it'll be important when we're looking at that split to remember that not all project imposed are a negative thing or being experienced as an imposition. I understand that there are cases like yours where it is, where you're maybe not in agreement, but I think we need to have some clarity around those different types of special circumstances. And probably the answer to your question is that it depends on the nature of those special circumstances in many cases.
Thanks. The question about the number of owner-requested special circumstances versus imposed is something I've had outstanding to staff for a month, and should only take an email or a phone call to PHAI to find out. And there's no reason that you don't know that answer as of today. Secondly, I've made it clear, I'll make it a question, you are aware that I've made clear to staff that I have no issue with owner-requested special circumstances, and I don't know that very few people would. My whole conversation is on owner-imposed circumstances. And so on the mayor's point, I'll jump ahead a question. As I said earlier, at the September 2025 quarterly presentation to council, PHAI stated that they heard clearly from the public and residents about their concerns regarding special circumstances, said they're working very closely with the Government of Canada to revisit that. Has the municipality engaged with PHAI and or the government regarding those concerns?
Yes, and we continue to engage.
And if so, what changes are being discussed and what is the status of those discussions?
The status of those discussions is that they're ongoing, and as I reported earlier today, there is a planned roundtable that is to be happening over the next couple of weeks to push forward on a number of these different items.
Is the ultimate goal to remove the liability from the residents for the waste remaining on their property, as it is unreasonable to put that on them, as was said by the Government of Canada at the beginning of this project?
We will that issue will be discussed at the meeting.
What is the goal?
The goal is to see where we can get in those discussions with all the different stakeholders at the table.
Not much of a goal.
The goal, Cameron, has to be realistic in terms of what is possible, what is the art of the possible. We continue to advocate. This is a complex file with numerous stakeholders, the federal government, the provincial government, all the different entities and their lawyers, and we're continuously trying to advocate forward in the best way possible.
I appreciate the difficulty of your job, and I appreciate the many wins that you have brought to the community in your term. So far as the vantage point of a resident with a home that requires remediation with contaminated soil, I've been so disappointed over the past couple of years, as you know, by this council for the most part. And again, thank you, Les, and I thank Councillor Adam, who's also spoken up for us recently. I've never been so disappointed and so flabbergasted as your conversation this evening about the settlement agreement. And as a homeowner from the vantage point of a property with contamination who is going to be now have special circumstances imposed and financial liability going forward, statements such as this is a bonus to the municipality, a great win. I understand the municipality is getting $8 million, and I understand that we have properties that have been cleaned. The statement that digging up soil and transporting it is not the difficult part, is about the most. I imagine it's just a statement that was made without thinking, but just is a level of.
I'm going to turn that over to Councillor Clare to respond to that, because I'm not sure. Is there a question in that?
Do you understand that for residents that have just gone through 6 months of remediation on their property with radioactive signs, with large equipment, with dozens of staff of municipal workers working on the property for 6 months, and in the future we may have to dig up soil, and we don't know who we would call to even hire to dig up radioactive material, how you get large equipment to dig that deep, but we may be financially responsible. Do we understand that it seems out of touch to say digging up the soil and transporting it is not the difficult part?
I'd like to assure you it was absolutely not a comment made without thinking. It is something that I have been thinking very deeply about for many, many years, including many years before I was at this council table as an advocate in this community. This is a win because you are getting more liability coverage now than you were getting before. So the 20-year liability period, they will still come back and get it and transport it and take it. That piece is still there for you. Now you have additional coverage up to 100 years, where should you ever need to dig up soil that has been left behind through a special circumstance, you now have that additional reassurance that you have a place to take it. And it is true that, the restrictions around digging up soil, there are no, if you look at the provincial standards, this gets complicated with the ministry and that, there are no special requirements for digging it up. It is the storage, the safe storage of that material that creates huge challenges and financial costs and stress and all of that, when it comes to where does that soil go. And so my comment was, that was a win. Mayor Elena was very clear. We are still working on, and she is, very involved in that, to try to get more for residents. But this is a win. It is better than what you had. And calling it a win just because it's not perfect and isn't perhaps, the most ideal situation you can imagine, I think is still okay, because we've come a long way from where we were. We now have more protection than we did before we signed this agreement.
Mayor, I really appreciate the time that you've given me tonight, and sincerely appreciate it. And all I really want is for us to have a conversation so we understand each other better. And I'll ask one last question in the hopes
I do want to make a point about the agreement. I just want to bring us back to the fact that that agreement was a council agreed to and driven agreement.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that.
I appreciate that. Done in confidence without the input of residents, specifically residents that require cleanup. It's not satisfactory to residents that require cleanup. It's one of the points I'd like to get across to you to better understand from the vantage point.
I think we can agree to disagree, because as Councillor Clare also spoke earlier today, this was in response to a lot of feedback from the community. And the agreement was exactly the way in which all other negotiations are required under the original agreement, 2001, Section 10.
So you're in agreement that, my first question was, are you in agreement with liability being transferred to residents? I suppose that you just answered it, that you are.
No, I'm
Okay.
talking about
So-
your point.
Okay.
No, I think we need to clarify this before you move on. I'm talking about how the agreement was negotiated and your point about it not being done with any input from residents. And as Councillor Clare spoke to earlier this evening, I think we don't need to go through this again. We've stated some important points. So would you like to get to your last question?
I'll get to my last question, but just quickly. So what you're saying is that this agreement came to through the input of residents, and through that input, the decision was made to have liability transferred to homeowners. Well, that's what's in the agreement. It wasn't changed. So I'm mistaken on that. My last question. Can you tell me what improvements in this agreement were provided to homeowners with special circumstances imposed on them? What new improvements were in this agreement?
In terms of folks that are already in the process, or?
Now, future,
Well,
past.
I think that one of the things that it provides flexibility around is people, for example, who had requested special circumstances on their property because they were very concerned about trees in their backyard, a particular tree, a particular piece of landscaping, a particular deck, something on their property where they didn't want to disturb that right now, that there is that ability to do that, not only for the next 20 years, but for the next 100 years. They don't have to worry about where that waste will go. If it's not for them, it could be for their children or the next owners. There is that longer term protection around being able to remove waste when people are ready to remove it.
So that ability to give an owner request to save a tree came about in 2022, I believe, was communicated from PHAI in 2024 for the first time, and was the first talk of any kind of special circumstances. And it was special circumstances posed to us as a gift to homeowners to save a tree, when in 2018, there had already been special circumstances imposed on homeowners that homeowners, to my knowledge, were never even informed of. So again, that was 2024, 2022, depending on the year. What is new in this agreement for homeowners with special circumstances imposed? And let me not do a trick question, because my understanding, and I could be wrong, what is new is that we now have a place to dispose of the waste that we are responsible for from year 20 to 100. And up to the year 20, we are responsible to dig it, and we can give it to them to transport it to their mound. Now, year 20 to 100, we dig it, and we have to transport it now. And the only new thing that I'm aware of is that we have a place to deposit it. And I would say the government of Canada, when they started this in 2001, were to clean the whole property to unrestricted use. It was unreasonable to put any liability on the homeowner. As you have said in the past yourself, you could test in any community around here and you're going to find levels similar to ours. But now we've undertaken this project and we've done testing, and our properties in this town end up now with scarlet letters of contamination that we have to give to future buyers that, like you say, our properties are all surrounding us, but we went into this on good faith that we were going to have properties cleaned up, no cost, unreasonable to put any liability on us, and today we have liability. And
well, this is where
if there's anything more new,
yeah,
if there's anything-
and can I'd like to
absolutely,
comment back, because you're covering a lot of territory there. So this is the point that I had made earlier about the fact that we do need to sort out what kind of compliance letter any property owner can receive once they have participated in the cleanup project, beyond the uneven letters that people have been receiving with incomplete, arguably, information, letters that are addressing the environmental and health concerns to bring them in line to what is actually reasonably safe to reduce that scarlet letter or that stigma. So that is very much an active part of the work that is continuing right now at this moment.
I hope we get to the point where our properties are not, we don't have this carrying forward. And my last thing in closing, I'll just say, again, thank you. And for residents that have this, I don't think from an initial project, if people were told at the beginning, we're going to do the best we can, and you may end up with a property that is going to be contaminated, that you'll be responsible for, that will be informed to future buyers, I don't know that the project would have gone forward. And from my vantage point, as a resident with a homeowner like that, to have liability that's going to be, that I can dig up, that they'll truck away for 20 years is no win, is no big win. To get another 80 years where I can have a spot to deposit it is no big win. And I don't know how the government sees, or anyone sees, that after 100 years, then what are we supposed to do with this? Is that supposed to be the answer to the question, and that is a big win? Just don't see it. I appreciate all the time you've given me to talk. I look forward to the Community Advisory Committee and potentially a town hall when we can have further discussions and understand each other better.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
Any other questions this evening? Yes, please, step forward.
Hi, Ed White, Mill Street. Just wondering if you could help me out on one question that I have with this thing. Municipal property, from what I read about this cleanup thing, municipal property is covered up to the levels that are agreed upon now. For, like, if it's a park, then that's considered. If it's a roadway, that's considered one thing. What I don't understand is if it's not covered, if you change like the zoning of a particular land or a particular park or roadway or something, if something changes in the future, then it's not, as I read it, that we would be, as a municipality, liable for the transportation and the excavation, but not the disposal, because there's a place to put it. But after, and the other thing that I'm not sure about is all this stuff is based on project completion. Well, what is that? I mean, we thought it was going to be done in 2018. What further? I'm not sure what project completion means, and I'm not sure what our responsibilities as a municipality would be after project completion if we want to, say, put housing in a park. Well, now it's a whole different level of responsibility.
I think it's a multi-pronged question, and I do think that this is something that we need to take our time with a really detailed response so that we're not missing anything. But one thing that I can answer right away is to say to you is if there are any municipally owned lands that have undergone remediation that, are not a full 100% remediation, there would be restrictions forever on what usage that land could have. So you would never have housing on that kind of parcel of land. But in terms of to give you a more fulsome response, I'd like to take this back and make sure that I don't miss any of the nuances, because there are many nuances in responding to that in a fulsome way. But the highlight that I want to make here is that we would never be using land in a way that wouldn't be appropriate to what it is safe to do.
The reason that I brought this up was just simply because we were talking about a program where we enter into some kind of agreement or whatever with donating municipal lands for housing or making available municipal lands for housing. If those municipal lands are not now slated for housing, then they would be cleaned up at a different level than what a housing thing would be. So I'm just, again, I was just wondering what the liability.
Yeah, no, really good question, and we'll make sure that we get a response back to you, because we are in the midst right now of exactly the land inventory and the disposal of lands in the land inventory, starting with some of the smaller parcels of land and seeing how we're going to move forward.
Thank you.
Ed.
Jamie Ferguson, Garden Hill. Mine will be quick. At the May 5th Committee of the Whole meeting, there was a zoning bylaw amendment, DS 0826, brought forward and then was withdrawn for further review. I was just wondering if there was a timeline when that was going to come back to council. I've had a lot of people ask me about it, and they're excited about it because in the rule with being able to have separate services, it's a bit of a game changer for ARUs. So, yeah, there's a lot of interest in it.
Thank you for that question, and we'll make sure that we get a response back to you on the exact date that can be expected to come back.
And then another quick one.
Okay.
In the original lease agreement for the tennis courts, was there a monetary value in it before they did the $200,000 lease?
I'd have to ask Director Snook to get you that detailed information, but we'll make sure that we get you that. I know that Councillor Mink wanted to say something in relation to the first question you asked.
Sure.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that it was one of the recommendations that I made that referred it back to staff, and I have had some conversations with that staff member for clarity on what my motion was, so I can give you the assurance that they are working on it. It's not lost, it's coming, and staff heard that conversation, and they are making those changes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
But we'll get back to you on the date question answer, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Faye Moore, Port Hope Community Health Concerns Committee. If I could make a couple statements first and then ask questions, if that's okay.
Actually, no, we don't. It's questions only, please.
All right. Is what you're talking about tonight and the agreement, the new agreement you're talking about with AECL, essentially agreeing to leave more radioactive waste around Port Hope for future generations? But you are making that official, and you are coming up with some ways to help protect homeowners with a place to put it if they choose to do that, or future homeowners. And I think that it is fraught with complications, and we're only scratching the surface. There's a lot we don't know. So starting in January, when you had your strategic plan from the staff, on there was preparing for new nuclear. That was on there. So speaking to Sarah's point about language, and also right-sizing the project. And so is this part of right-sizing the project, that it becomes more voluntary, which was not envisioned in the original legal agreement? And are you planning to do an amendment to the legal agreement to make that official? Will we see all of the peer review reports, presuming that you have some, that validate a decision to go down this road, that help address the many issues that come up as a result of that, including the liabilities for current owners, neighbors, future owners? If there is no access to a property, how can it be determined that there are no health or environmental impacts today or in the future? How can the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission determine whether or not the material there meets the criteria for a CNSC license, which they were requiring of CNL in earlier versions of the Special Circumstances Protocol? They said, we need to know that. We need to know the volume. We need to know what's in it. We need to know the readings. If they are not allowed on the property and you allow that to go on and you sign on to that, there is a lot of mystery land around Port Hope for future generations. And that has been a major concern of ours for some time. Will property deeds be impacted? And I'm fine to just leave these questions with you, okay? Will property deeds be impacted? Will there be a tag like asbestos in the old days? Will there be something that says this property has restrictions? You cannot dig here, you cannot make this. How much public property has been exempted already? Where is it? Will you provide a list to the public and give a specific list of the roads and the frontages? Because many of those will affect private property owners. Did you obtain peer reviews, thorough, technical, legal, on all aspects? Will you make all of those available as they should be being made available to a proper community advisory committee of residents that are actually supposed to be involved in every aspect of the property, the project as a whole? They were the linchpin between people who live here and the people doing the project. I've asked whether you're going to do an amendment. Maybe that's a question you could answer now. Is part of bringing people together, it feels very much like fast-tracking this, to right-size this, to make it cheaper, smaller, faster. getting them in the room, trying to make exceptions, trying to get things passed. What is the end result going to be for Port Hope? Property changes, land changes, owners change. They're gone in a year. Generations will come. What are we leaving them? Right now, Port Hope has the opportunity to do this right. And the point was made earlier about using the leverage that you have, that we have right now to get it done right. If you cave, and some of this feels a lot like caving, to a federal agenda with American business owners running the project, and there's a lot of money on the table. So is this going too far and leaving too much for future generations? So I will leave the questions at that for now. We will be coming back again in a more detailed way. We have submitted a petition to the Auditor General of Canada. Part of it relates to Wesleyville and our strong objections to the plan of OPG. Part of it is around special circumstances and the lack of adherence to the legal agreement and the commitments that were made to the community, which still matter. Thank you.
Thank you for your list of questions, and I hope that you can submit all of them to the clerk so that we have all of them captured on record, and so that in turn answers can be provided to each one of those questions.
Okay.
Thank you for
very
being
much.
here.
Julia Duguay, with regard to the high-level meeting with ACL, CNL governments for a path forward to mitigate concerns, why was this not done before approving the ACL agreement, one? And two, how and when will the information gathered be communicated to the homeowners?
I think in relation to your first question, this project has involved a number of high-level meetings for at least the last 4 years. Those meetings have largely been one-on-one between either a municipal representative and somebody from ACL, someone else meeting from somebody from CNL. And over a period of time, it became very clear that what needed to happen was to bring everybody into a room together. And especially because there are certain pieces of the project that still need to be addressed that weren't addressed or weren't able to be addressed through this new agreement. So it wasn't purposefully omitted from this agreement. It has just come to a bit more of a heightened state in terms of requiring to have everybody in the room together, better communicating around a path forward so that these one-off conversations were not continuing on some of the issues. And I'm going to actually ask the CAO to speak to this as well.
So, in my last term, my last year being on there, I've had significant conversations with, separate parties, whether it's ACL or CNL, part of these negotiations. And to the mayor's point, it's these separate conversations that, have moved us along slowly. And to the mayor's intent of having a comprehensive, fulsome conversation with all these people at the table, that will be the game-changing aspect of this, moving the project forward.
Okay, so the results of this meeting, or whatever information you gather, will you be using that to go back to ACL and change conditions of the settlement that you now have?
I think it's very premature to speak to that. I think that we've heard At tonight's meeting, we continued to hear some of the outstanding issues that still need to be addressed and resolved. And so it's our intention to ensure that all of those are brought together in front of all the folks that are in the decision-making positions, including legal representatives, to make sure that we find a path forward on all of this. So it makes much more sense to have a general meeting of that nature and bring up all of the outstanding issues that still need to be discussed.
And do you think that you have knowledge, a full knowledge of the issues facing homeowners in this community? I've never been asked for my opinion.
I think that through the communications that have been received from homeowners through emails, I think through the discussions that we've had at the council table here, that we have a very good sense of issues that are still on the landscape that need to be resolved and at least brought to the table with those that can. There's certain places where we can impact decisions, and there's certain people that need to hear that information all in one room so that knowledge can be raised and so a path can be determined to move forward.
Okay, so and to my second question, when and how will the information gathered and the information you gave them, these people at the table, when will that be communicated to the homeowners? Like, how do I know that my issues are on the table? In other words.
Yep, as soon as that meeting occurs, there'll be a fulsome reporting back at this council table on all the issues that were discussed and some of the potential paths forward.
Okay. The other thing, I am questioning. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I'm having surgery tomorrow. So, okay. So, Councillor Less seemed to think that he had not authorized the signing of the AACL document.
Can I, I'll answer that right now.
Yes.
Before, because I know what your question will be. I was at the meeting.
Yes.
I moved the motion to further the negotiation and the signing. I gave signing approval to the CAO and mayor.
Yes.
And I can't comment as to what was in the meeting, the closed session meeting. I can comment about what is before me now. And there's an issue that isn't addressed in either, but I'll leave it at that. So I was there, I approved the motion to negotiate. But I can't go into details. I'm going to have a separate meeting with the mayor and CAO on this.
Okay.
I just need to ask the clerk to also comment on this, just for full transparency and clarity.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Councillor Andrews stated, is that he was present at the, just based on the comments earlier, that with respect to his knowledge of the discussion of the ongoing AECL agreement, that Councillor Andrews was present at that meeting.
Okay. I think one item that I think a lot of homeowners are upset about is that everything seems to be cloaked under secrecy. We ask, so we get notified. My property has been notified twice that they're doing complete change. My first notification was that everything was going to be cleaned. Then, no, it's not going to be cleaned. And what I'm concerned about is that it's impossible to get information. The information is always under a cloak of secrecy. If you ask for a report, it's really hard to get some reports sometimes. If you get a report and the report refers to something else, you cannot get that report from CNL. And we have problems with getting, as I said earlier, we have problems with having expert staff, experts helping us, because it's, no lawyer in town will look at you.
So if I could just reword those into questions, can I suggest that one of the questions is, how do we get the reports on the property, and how do we get access to the experts that can advise us or support us in terms of some of those reports?
Yes, I want to
Okay.
pay someone. I want
Okay.
someone independent.
Okay.
I go and I pay them $100 and tell me what's happening.
Thank you. I'll take those questions forward and get you a response.
And that was one of my points today. We need to have access to a panel of experts that CNL has not used.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Council, I promise I'll be less than a minute. Please, clerk, play me off with a bell if I'm more than a minute. And I feel we've made a lot of progress tonight, so I just want to say that it's been said that even with what I've said, that it's a great win for homeowners, this new agreement with homeowners with remediation. And so my question is, if you know of anything new in this agreement beyond the homeowner able to transport themselves, pay to excavate, pay to transport, but a place to deposit the waste from year 22-100, and that waste no longer includes arsenic anymore. So the only improvement that I know of is 20-100, place to deposit, radioactive material, not including arsenic, and I don't see that as a great win. If someone can tell me that there's more to win in this, or how that is a great win, I would appreciate hearing it.
Thank you, Cameron.
Jim Sculthorpe, 1685 Willow Beach Road. There's a lot of concern about legal, and you're going into quite a major meeting. Does the municipality have a strong enough legal team to deal with federal and provincial lawyers? You are going into something that I don't think you've been at before. And I hope that our community has hired environmental and really top-notch lawyers that can stand up against the federal and provincial government, because that's what you're going to need to do when you go into that meeting, because they will run you around in circles, because they've been doing it since 1937 when El Dorado Nuclear came to Port Hope.
Thank you for that question, and I think this one here, I'm going to ask the CAO to comment on.
So, Mr. Sculthorpe, yes, we have both internal and external legal counsel that have helped us negotiate these contracts from day one. We have our current lawyer has been on this file for a decade and a half, I will say. So very well versed in all the agreements, very good understanding of the situation in Port Hope. I am confident in my legal team, internal and external.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody for staying throughout the question period. I know it's a long evening, but we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate the questions. Moving on to item number 18, which is our confirmatory bylaw. It's now time for the confirmatory bylaw. Confirms the proceedings that took place this evening and provides a formal adoption through a bylaw. Can I get a mover and seconder on this? Moved by Councillor Darrell, seconded by Councillor Clare. All in favor? That is passed. This concludes our business to be covered on today's agenda. We've reached the end, and I'm in a position to adjourn the meeting at 10:04 p.m. Thank you.